Chapter 653. In November, the temperature plummeted. The students of Shungmalian Academy had already unknowingly put on all kinds of scarves. For the students who had to strictly abide by the school uniform, small things like scarves, gloves, and hats became the few options that could be freely matched. Many people would even give their loved ones handmade scarves and hats at the Christmas party. Day came out in a hurry, and his clothes were slightly thin. After calming down, he felt quite cold. He rubbed his hands and said to the polymorph, "Anyway, try transforming first." "Hurry, hurry." The polymorph's beady eyes immediately stood up. The young green-eyed dragon also very cooperatively walked in front of it, and let it use itself as a reference to transform. In the name of Dake Dimung Magic Summoning. Pride 3. The polymorph's body slightly expanded, and under the effect of Pride 3, it was promoted from 1 star to 4 stars. Then it suddenly straightened its body, and its whole body suddenly became bigger. In the blink of an eye, it was the same height as the young green-eyed dragon. Remember in a second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. When the transformation ended, the polymorph had completely transformed into a young green-eyed dragon. Other than the fact that its magic power was only 400, it was no different from the real green-eyed dragon. In this point, it was very different from the demon fox that could not copy the killing move. In addition, the Green Eyes incarnation of the green-eyed white dragon was different from the transformation of the polymorph and the fox transformation of the demon fox. The Green Eyes incarnation, Green Eyes incarnation, Green Eyes white dragon, was the only one that could copy magic power. Therefore, the level of this transformation should be higher than fox transformation. As for whether it could be offered as a sacrifice, in fact, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Green Eyes White Dragon was a card that could be used as a Green Eyes White Dragon after it appeared. However, Dake's Green Eyes White Dragon relied on the incomplete Pride to hatch, so it might have some flaws. This was because the Green Eyes White Dragon was originally a monster card with the same star level, attack, and defense as the Green Eyes White Dragon. In other words, after it was transformed into a Magic Elven card, it should be a 9-star Magic Elven card under normal circumstances. At that time, it would not need the Green Eyes incarnation at all. It would be the Green-Eyed White Dragon. A lot of thoughts flashed through Dake's mind, but he had already raised the Fusion magic card in his hand. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon Fusion. As a huge amount of mana was injected into Fusion, a dazzling light burst out. White and black fish burrowed out of the card face and grew in the wind. One of the two fishes flew towards the young green-eyed dragon, while the other one entangled the young green-eyed dragon. The progress of fusion was very normal so far. The two magic guiding fairies merely looked at each other before they turned into rays of light and soared into the sky. Seeing this, Dake could no longer contain his excitement. If the fusion was successful, what kind of magic guide fairy could the two 6-star, cyanide infant dragons fuse into? 7-star, 8-star, or 9-star? Considering that the blue-eyed white dragon was 9 stars, the blue-eyed infant dragon was a whole level lower. In that case, the chances of the two young cyanide dragons fusing into a 9-star dragon was extremely high. At the very least, it should be an 8-star dragon. His eyes shone with strong anticipation as he looked up at the black and white fishes that had merged into a Tai Chi pattern in the sky. He held his breath and stared. As the black and white fishes formed a huge and mysterious fusion summoning circle in the sky, the two 6-star dragons fused into a blue-eyed white dragon finally emerged from the fusion summoning circle slowly. Different from the blue-eyed white dragon that was hatched using the incomplete Pride. This fused white dragon was indeed fused using the proper method. It was a genuine Gao Xinglong. The faces of the two magic guiding cards, Fantasy Beast, Multiform, and Blue-Eyed Infant Dragon, turned into their fused forms at the same time. It was a two-headed, round-headed green-eyed infant dragon. Blue-eyed explosive infant dragon. Picture. After the fusion, the blue-eyed explosive infant dragon was only slightly bigger in size. It was far from the blue-eyed white dragon of the Green Eyes incarnation, but the dragon aura it released was completely comparable. Dake was ecstatic and immediately opened his mouth to call it down from the sky to give it a good rub. But before he could make a sound, the blue-eyed explosive infant dragon, in the sky suddenly fell down and issued a fierce shriek from the two dragon mouths. The dragon heads were intertwined with each other and the chicken wings were flapping wildly, but there was no coordination at all. The blue-eyed explosive infant dragon was actually spinning in the air. Dake fiercely covered his eyes. By the time the blue-eyed explosive infant dragon had finally adapted a little, it was already 5 minutes later. The embarrassed state of the blue-eyed explosive infant dragon fell completely into the eyes of the curious students. It landed at the top of the clock tower, and the two heads were at odds at the same time. Dake couldn't help but cover his forehead and say, "So which head is the multiform monster? Which head is the green-eyed infant dragon?" "AI, let's start with the multiform monster. Lower your head." So, the dragon head on the left hung down. Dake held the delicate scales on the dragon head and felt the active magic waves under the scales. Finally, he said excitedly, "It's very successful, isn't it? Although there were some mistakes in the first fusion, it was just a coordination problem caused by the simultaneous existence of different consciousnesses. It was just like a game of 2 people and 3 legs. As long as the proficiency and compatibility were increased, the problem would naturally be solved. And the benefits of having 2 heads were also highlighted. Separating the consciousnesses of the 2 magical spirits would not cause confusion between the consciousnesses of the single magical spirit." Dake injected magic into the card and quickly received the information on the card. Card name, Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon. Type, Sprite card. Level, Race, Dragon. Attribute, Light/Dragon. Magic power, 4500, Attack 5000, Defense, 4500. Ultimate skills, Destructive Spray of White Light, Dragon's Reverse Scale, Double-Dimensional Explosive / White Dragon. Immortality, it has the same star level attribute and 3 measurements as Green-Eyed White Dragon. And compared to Green-Eyed Incarnation, 30-second duration. Fusion can last for at least 15 minutes. It can be used as a regular combat power. It's just that it's not easy to summon it in a magician duel. Dake recalled the summoning procedure. Fantasy Beast, Changeable Monster, Green-Eyed Infant Dragon, Great Sin 3 or Great Sin V, Fusion. I have to gather a total of 4 cards. It was possible to gather all 4 cards in a duel with a lower grade. Once it entered a duel with a higher grade, a 6-star magical spirit like Green-Eyed Infant Dragon might not be able to hold its ground. But the magician duel is only secondary. The improvement of actual combat power is the key. This Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon is comparable to Night Tiger God in terms of attributes. As long as it improves its combat power, it can conquer a deeper level of the dungeon. At that time, the high-level materials obtained can naturally be used to improve the magician duel. This is obviously a virtuous cycle. Dake continued to look at the ultimate skill of Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon. Whether a magical spirit card was useful or not, the 3 attributes alone were not enough to completely determine it. The most important thing was still the ultimate skill. The first ultimate skill of Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon was the cheap and practical Destructive White Light Spray. It had no cooldown, no recoil, and only needed 3 seconds of charging to release a long-distance beam skill. Although it did not increase the attack power, its practicality was very high. Destructive White Light Spray. The 2 heads of Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon can shoot out destructive white beams at the same time. The damage received after being hit cannot be recovered. The power of each beam is equivalent to a full-strength attack. Mana consumption is 100 points. Charging time is 3 seconds. No cooldown. Should I say that it's really 2 heads? Dake couldn't help but laugh. On the first day of the Golden Cup, last Friday, he saw that Noah Sharp's Magical Night Dragon could split the dragon's breath spear into 2. He felt that this ultimate skill was too overpowered. It was equivalent to doubling the damage output, without taking defense into account. He didn't expect that after only a week, he would have a magical spirit that was similar to an ultimate skill. He then looked at the next ultimate skill. Dragon's Reverse Scale. Similar to Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon, Green-Eyed Explosive Infant Dragon also had the ultimate skill, Dragon's Reverse Scale. Dragon's Reverse Scale. the green-eyed explosive infant dragon shatters its reverse scale and enters a berserk state. Its attack power is greatly increased by 50% to 100%. However, it will enter a state of confusion. Lasts for 3 minutes. However, having 2 heads and 2 thoughts would definitely cause the ultimate effect of this ultimate skill to change. The key point was, when one head entered a state of confusion, could the other head remain clear-headed? Once he could do that, the effect of the Sure Kill skill Dragon's reverse scale would undergo an earth-shattering change. A controllable berserk ultimate skill. It was scary just thinking about it. Dake continued to look at the third ultimate skill. Double-dimensional explosive slash. Double-dimensional explosive slash. The green-eyed explosive infant dragon's claws can tear through space and deal double the damage to the target. If it can't kill the opponent, it will banish the opponent out of the dimension. When he received the information of this ultimate skill, the corner of Dake's eyes suddenly twitched, revealing a trace of shock. The basic damage of double-dimensional explosive slash was as high as 10,000 points. It was an ultimate skill that could unleash double the basic attack power. Even among the ultimate skills of a 9-star magical spirit, it was one of the top ultimate skills. Moreover, it had an incomprehensible effect. Banishing an opponent that couldn't be killed? Where would it be banished to? Was it inside the torn space? After the magical spirit was swallowed by that space, could it return to the magical spirit card? Dake suddenly became alert. Professor Kazair had said in his first year that magical spirits weren't truly immortal. There were many mysteries in this world, and there were many methods that could truly destroy magical spirits. Could this double-dimensional explosive slash be one of them? Then, as his opponent, should he pray that his magical spirit card could withstand the 10,000 points of damage of double-dimensional explosive slash? Or should he pray that it couldn't? Dake couldn't help but ponder. If it was a life-and-death duel with enmity, it would be fine. If it was an ordinary competition like the Golden Cup, banishing the opponent's magical spirit card out of the dimension, and causing irreparable damage to the magical spirit card. Even if there wasn't any enmity before, there would be after the duel. However, in the hands of the students of Shungmalian Academy, there shouldn't be many magical spirits that could withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash without dying. Moreover, a magical spirit card that could withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash without dying must be extremely powerful. Currently, the judgment of the banishing effect of double-dimensional explosive slash was still unclear, and there was still a possibility that it would fail. Therefore, whether this additional effect would work or not needed to be evaluated rationally. In the end, more experimental data was needed to support it. However, the double-dimensional explosive slash wasn't easy to experiment with. He couldn't possibly use a magical spirit card that could withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash for an experiment that was highly likely to go wrong. As for the magical spirit card that hadn't gained sentience and had just been refined, it wouldn't be able to withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash at all. No, there was magical spirit beast, multiform monster. Dake's heart skipped a beat as he began to think. Magical spirit beast, multiform monster, already had an individual with sentience, so using Great Sin 3 or Great Sin V would allow it to advance to the second tier. Then, magical spirit beast, multiform monster, would transform into a second-tier magical spirit card. Then, among the second-tier magical spirits that he had, which of them could withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash without dying? Cat Boss with guard and thick fur? Kettle with sturdy? That's right. As long as I transform into Kettle, even if I don't advance to the second tier, I still have a chance to withstand the double-dimensional explosive slash without dying. Dake clapped his fists as he came up with a plan. However, since he hadn't checked out the last Sure Kill skill, he needed to wait for a while before he could start experimenting. Dake calmed down and infused his mana to check out the last Sure Kill skill. White Dragon Immortality by Bare Hands. White Dragon Immortality by Bare Hands. Green Eyes Dual Explosive Dragon won't die from pure physical damage. A death immunity skill? Dake suddenly felt that his brain wasn't enough to process all of this. Speaking of death immunity skills, Kettle, sturdy, was actually a death immunity skill. However, the mechanisms of the two skills were obviously different. White Dragon Immortality by bare hands was indeed a very overpowered sure-kill skill at certain times, but what if the opponent's attack was just a tiny bit non-physical? Moreover, immortality didn't mean that the magical spirit card would be able to maintain its peak condition. If the magical spirit card didn't die even when its mana was reduced to 0, its combat ability would be greatly weakened. In other words, it might not be that useful in real situations. However, that was all theoretical analysis. Right now, he just had to accept it. Dake patted and took out Fantasy Beast, Multiform, and Kettle that he had just refined from his card pack. Then he summoned Kettle first. BZT. Kettle was still a little confused when it was suddenly summoned, but as soon as the cold wind blew, it woke up and quickly turned around to crawl towards Dake. Dake squatted down and hugged it, saying, "Cooperate with me, let's do a little experiment." Then he summoned the Fantasy Beast, Multiform, that he had just refined. Just in case, Dake still upgraded this Fantasy Beast, Multiform, to 4 stars before ordering it to transform into Kettle. BZD. Kettle looked at the strange multiform monster that had transformed into itself and subconsciously shrunk its neck and hid behind Dake's feet. Then, it secretly raised its head to glance at the Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp, and felt surprised. Obviously, it did not understand that this was the product of the Multiform and Green Eyes young dragon whelp's fusion. As for the Multiform that had transformed into Kettle, it originally had an intelligence level of 2.0, but when compared to Kettle, it was obviously much more sluggish. Because it was not considered a creature with self-awareness, Dake did not have any psychological burden when doing these experiments. Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp, get ready. After sending out the reminder, Dake picked up Kettle and quickly retreated to the side behind the Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp, so that it could unleash its ultimate skill on the Fantasy Beast, Multiform, that had transformed into Kettle, without any hesitation. Everything was ready. The two heads of the Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp looked at each other and softly communicated with each other. Then this huge dragon whelp stretched out its claws timidly. Dake's expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously took a step back because he could clearly see that the two claws of the Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp were extremely uncoordinated. If this ultimate skill was unleashed incorrectly, thinking of this, he quickly took out the flight spell and quickly activated it. Just as his feet left the ground, the Green Eyes dual explosive dragon whelp suddenly took a step forward and stretched out its two claws one after the other. A white light lit up from its shoulders and spread all the way to the dragon claws. The intensity of the light instantly increased, and an extremely hot light burst out. Then, almost at the same time, the two dragon claws clawed at the Fantasy Beast, Multiform, that had transformed into Kettle. The dragon claws drew a cross. The white light blade released from the claws formed a cross, and in the blink of an eye, it landed on Kettle's body. Without a sound, the space was torn apart. With the Fantasy Beast, Multiform Kettle's body as the center, two extremely long space rifts suddenly appeared. Dake held Kettle in one hand and the flight spell and Fantasy Beast, Multiform Kettle's magic card in the other hand, and quickly checked his perception. Almost at the same time that the space rifts appeared, the Fantasy Beast, Multiform Kettle's magic value dropped from 400 points all the way to 1 point. Although it was said to be 1, it was actually just a data display. It definitely could not mobilize any magic power at that time. In the next moment, the two space rifts that crossed each other, in the darkest part of the space rifts, like a huge mouth, suddenly expanded for a moment. A powerful suction force instantly erupted. Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster Kettle, was swallowed into the crack without any resistance. Then, in the next second, the space was smoothed out and the Fantasy Beast, Multiform Kettle, completely disappeared. This scene instantly reminded Dake of the Holy Angel Beast's Heaven's Gate. Bazi Biazi? Huhu, who was in Dark's arms, rubbed its head against Dark's chest and revealed a curious expression. Dake then slowly said, "After it was swallowed into the space rifts, it died instantly." However, some of the necessary items that were released during the summoning can no longer be retrieved, so the magic card has received real damage. If there is a data about durability, the magic card's durability should have lost more than 1/3 of its durability. Kettle? Kettle asked. Dake nodded. Yes, this means that as long as it is exiled by the dual-dimensional bursting / 3 times, the magic card will be completely destroyed. Kettle. Kettle immediately raised its tentacles and covered its head, looking scared. Dake paused for a moment and added, of course, the prerequisite is that the opponent did not repair the damaged part of the magic card. Although the repair of the magic card is the same as the second refinement, which is extremely difficult, if one is careful, the probability of the card exploding is not too high. Dake looked up at the blue-eyed dual explosive baby dragon and said, since we have already started, why don't we try other sure-kill skills? For example, Dragon's Reverse Scale. Then the consciousness of the multiform monster and the blue-eyed dragon started to quarrel over who should use the dragon's reverse scale. The experiment failed. After completing the fusion experiment, Dake quickly returned to the Magical Zoology Society. He then summoned the Sabegu to his side. Among his magic fairies, other than the blue-eyed dragon, only the Sabegu was a real dragon species. If he wanted to conduct another fusion experiment on the blue-eyed dragon and any other dragon species, he could only rely on it. Leave it to me. After the Sabegu heard this, it was extremely excited and patted its chest. It was obviously very happy to conduct such an experiment. However, the fusion magic card went into cooldown and needed to wait for a while. Dake used this period of time to record and summarize the various data of the blue-eyed dual explosive baby dragon. After the cooldown of the fusion card was over, he once again ascended to the top of the spiral clock tower. This time, the fusion materials were the blue-eyed dragon and the curse cage, Sabegu. Could a 6-star dragon species and a 2-star dragon species be fused? Seeing that they were ready, Dake summoned and activated the fusion magic card in his hand. With the injection of a large amount of magic, the black and white fishes once again flew out from the card surface and then wrapped around the blue-eyed dragon and the curse cage, Sabegu respectively. Then, these two dragon species very smoothly turned into light and formed a huge fusion summoning circle in the air. The tyrant, with its greenish-yellow wings spread out and ascended to the world. 77.5/139. Good morning. Thank you very much for your monthly vote support. Continue to desperately beg for monthly votes. Chapter 654. The violent draconic aura spread wildly. The accumulated aura was extremely oppressive, as if dark clouds were covering the sky and rain was about to come. The tyrant with its greenish-yellow light wings had its silver scales stained with a heavy metal-like dark color. If it wasn't for the light aura it was emitting, it would really look like a black dragon. Dake narrowed his eyes as he observed the light-winged dragon species that looked like a tyrant descending upon the world. However, he was worried that it only had one head. Next time, I'll try to let a non-sentient fusion material card fuse with the green-eyed baby dragon. With that thought in mind, he lifted the green-eyed baby dragon's magic card to check. Green-eyed tyrant. Baby dragon? Although the words tyrant and baby did not match well when put together. However, after the green-eyed baby dragon fused with the curse cage, subbeast, it indeed became the green-eyed tyrant baby dragon. Other than the violent aura of the green-eyed tyrant baby dragon in front of him, it also had a round head and was quite cute. Website. https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. However, Dake could clearly feel that the strength of this green-eyed tyrant baby dragon was quite different from the green-eyed double explosive baby dragon. It was obviously not the 9-star magic guide elf that he expected. However, a magic guide elf that can be fused with any dragon species can't possibly reach 9-star strength. Dake injected magic power into the magic card, and soon received the feedback on the information. Card name, Green-Eyed Tyrant Baby Dragon. Type, Elf card. Level, for all. Race, Dragon species. Attribute, Light/Dragon species. Magic power, 3000. Attack, 3500. Defense, 3000. Ultimate skills, Tyrant Green Eye's mighty light, Green Eye's mysterious flash, burst wind bullet of destruction. Only 6-star? Dake could not help but frown at the unchanged level. However, after seeing the changes in the 3 attributes, he was suddenly enlightened. Compared to the 6-star Green-Eyed Baby Dragon, the Green-Eyed Tyrant Baby Dragon was obviously strengthened in all aspects. First of all, magic power, attack, and defense had all increased by 500. Such supermodel attributes made people sigh. As for its sure-kill skill, Tyrant, it further increased the stats of the Cyanide Tyrant Infant Dragon. It was hard to imagine that it was only a 6-star magic elf card. Tyrant. As the Emperor of Dragons, the Green-Eyed Tyrant Whelp has the characteristic of being immune to most transformation-type sure-kill skills. Mana plus 500, attack plus 500, defense plus 500, hypostasis plus 0. 5 When it is enraged, it will enter a berserk state, and its attack will be greatly increased by 50% to 100%. However, it will enter an incomplete state of confusion for 3 minutes. In short, it was the fusion of a weakened version of the God Personality Armament and the Dragon's reverse scale. Dark saw through Tyrant's true nature with a single glance. However, it had to be said that the effect of the sure kill skill, Tyrant, was especially terrifying. Moreover, his horizons had been broadened after this. Hypostasis plus 0. 5. Dake couldn't help but laugh. Although that was the case, the changes brought about by Hypostasis plus 0.5 were huge. At least, it made its hypostasis higher than the second-tier magic elves. When facing the third-tier magic elves, it wouldn't be restricted too much. This sure kill skill could be said to have allowed the Cyanide Tyrant Whelp to be upgraded as a whole. Compared to the Cyanide Subwhite Dragon, that didn't have any strong offensive abilities other than the Cyanide Avatar, it was much more powerful. Moreover, this Tyrant also had a berserk active effect. It was worth noting that the side effect was entering an incomplete state of confusion. This meant that after the Tyrant was activated, the Cyanide Tyrant Whelp could still retain a part of its consciousness and wouldn't be completely confused. This was a crucial point. Let's continue with the next sure kill skill, Cyanide Might. Dake injected more mana to check it out. Cyanide Might. The Cyanide Tyrant Whelp releases a terrifying dragon aura, causing the target it is staring at to have a strong reaction of fear, unable to move or attack. If the target's attack power is higher than the Cyanide Tyrant Whelp, the deterrence effect will gradually decrease. It was a single target control sure kill skill with restrictions. Although its effect was far from the Tyrant's, it might have an extraordinary effect when necessary. Moreover, the Cyanide Tyrant Whelp's basic attack power was actually as high as 4,000 points. After the Tyrant's berserk state was triggered, the attack power could reach 6,000 to 8,000 points. Therefore, the Cyanide Might's deterrence range was actually very, very wide. Dake immediately looked at the third sure kill skill, Cyanide Arcane Flash. Cyanide Arcane Flash. The Cyanide Tyrant Whelp's intelligence and strength coexist. When it is present, the Cyanide Tyrant Whelp will be able to remember most of the magic released by the Magus and release it again within 3 minutes. A sure kill skill that is similar to the sure kill skill, Imitation, but can only be used on the Magus? The key is the second release of the magic. Then what is the range of the magic? The magic of the magic card doesn't count. Does the Great Sin card, which is classified as a magic card, count? There's also Fusion, Netherworld Soul Ring, Zoo, Paradise. Dake couldn't help but think quickly. From its literal meaning, the Cyanide Arcane Flash was a sure kill skill with very strong groundbreaking effects. Amongst them, the Fusion and Great Sin card's duplication were especially important. If he could replicate Arrogance's effect, this was especially important. If he used it properly, he might be able to evolve 2 zombie Tyrannosauruses. Just thinking about how the zombie Tyrannosauruses could fire 4 missiles instead of 2 made him shudder. Dake was very satisfied with this Cyanide Tyrant Whelp. Furthermore, its last sure kill skill was the legendary Explosive Gale Bullet of Annihilation. Explosive Gale Bullet of Annihilation. the cyanide tyrant whelp shoots out an explosive gale bullet with the power of destruction, causing double damage to all targets within the area of effect. The damage caused cannot be recovered. When released, the overly powerful energy will cause the energy within the cyanide tyrant whelp's body to become chaotic, causing it to be unable to attack for 30 seconds. Is this the legendary Sure Kill skill? It's indeed not on the same level as the destructive gale bullet of white light. Dake couldn't help but sigh. A Sure Kill skill with a large area of effect with an attack power of 8,000 points. If it successfully hits the magic ball in the magic duel, it can directly end the match. Too strong. Just by fusing with a low-star dragon species, the cyanide tyrant whelp can become a cyanide tyrant whelp. Is this fusion? Since that's the case, let's do a little experiment on the cyanide arcane flash. After a few minutes, the experiment ended. Curse Cage, Evil Demon Beast and Diru Beast evolved into Zombie Tyrannosaurus and Fairy Beast, one after another. Looking at the two 7-star digital beasts, Dake's face lit up with joy. Cyanide Arcane Flash had a limit, but it was obviously compatible with Pride, and could perfectly replicate Pride. As for Bliss and Greed, although there was no experiment if it was only Bliss 3 or Greed 3, it seemed to be feasible. As for whether the fusion magic card could be replicated, he could only wait and experiment later. However, the current Pride was only an incomplete version. If he could replicate the complete version of Pride, then he would be truly invincible. After Dake let the cyanide tyrant whelp perform what Tyrant was, he returned to the club's classroom. After that, he didn't stay in the club's classroom for long. Instead, he returned to the dormitory excitedly. The two fusion experiments were very successful. Among them, although the cyanide double explosive whelp's strength was terrifying, the summoning conditions were more stringent. Although the cyanide tyrant whelp was slightly inferior, the summoning conditions were much more relaxed. As long as he let the fantasy beast, Spell Seal Creature Dragon, record the Curse Cage, Sub-Beast's information, it could replace the Sub-Beast and sacrifice it together with the cyanide tyrant whelp to summon the cyanide tyrant whelp. In this way, it was equivalent to using only 2 magic cards to successfully summon the cyanide tyrant whelp. During this period, he could even let the cyanide tyrant whelp open the Hall of Light. It was perfect. After returning to the dormitory, Dake quickly calmed down and continued with the second refinement experiment. The whole morning passed by just like that, busy and happy. His golden tournament schedule for this week was arranged on Saturday and Sunday. Therefore, he still had a whole day to continue his research. In the evening, the additional fantasy beast that he refined in the morning had been used up. Dake had no choice but to take out another 6 fantasy beast hairs and quickly refine them. After an hour, 6 new fantasy beast cards were lying quietly on the experiment table. So far, he had used a total of 28 fantasy beast hairs. Just as Professor Kazair said, only 10 fantasy beast hairs were far from enough. If he wanted to use the fastest speed to master the second refinement, even if it was just the beginning, he would need a large amount of resources. In short, resources, talent, hard work, and luck were all indispensable. The 6 illusionary beast cards he had refined this evening were 4 illusionary beast, Ibu, 1 illusionary beast, Devil Beast King of the Swamp, and 1 illusionary beast, Fantasy Sheep. A total of 4 copies of Illusory Beast, Ivan, had been sold consecutively, and Dark had a faint premonition. He became more and more serious in his research. As Fantasy Beast, Devil Beast King of the Swamp, and Fantasy Beast, Imaginary Sheep, were sacrificed one after another, he began to work on the remaining 4 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards. Because of the Great Sin card, Fantasy Beast, Ibu's killing move did not need to be adjusted too much. Therefore, Dake's main focus was on how to increase its 3 stats. Because of the uniqueness of the Fantasy Beast, its magic power, attack, and defense were usually 100 points. Even if it was a little special, 200 points was already not bad. And the lower the base value, the easier it would be to increase it. Dake's initial goal was to increase Fantasy Beast, Ibu's 3 stats to the full value of 1 star, which was 500 points. Once Fantasy Beast, Earbook, S3 stats were all increased to 500 points, the evolved form after using the Great Sin card would naturally increase as well. That way, Fantasy Beast, Earbook's usefulness would increase by a lot. His final goal was to increase Fantasy Beast, Earbook, to the full value of 3 stars. After another 2 Fantasy Beast, Earbook cards were sacrificed, it was already 8:30 in the evening. Dake spent half an hour summarizing the reasons for his failure and finding the answer before starting the next round of refining experiments. Before the experiment began, he didn't think of anything else, and simply carried the mentality of continuing to use common sense. Then, after the experiment began, the whole process was unusually smooth. When he came back to his senses, a brand new Magic Elven card was already placed on the experiment table. He used tweezers to carefully remove the impurities on the card, and looked at the Fantasy Beast, Earbook, that hadn't changed much, and the left side of his heart suddenly began to thump loudly, because there were 2 stars above the picture of Illusory Beast, Ivan. Success. Up until now, Dake still didn't dare to believe it. He had already mentally prepared himself to struggle for at least a month. He didn't think that in just a week, there would be results. Although the information he could see from the card was very limited, there was an extra star and an obvious increase in his 3 body measurements. All of this told him that the second refinement was a success. Let me take a closer look. Dake used tweezers to pick up the magic card, and then brought it to the tap to wash it clean. Squeak. The sensitive little Ivan seemed to have sensed something and ran over with a biu-biu-biu sound. Dake picked up the magic card and immediately infused it with magic power. Card name, Fantasy Beast Earbook. Type, Elf card. Level, 00 race, bird. Attribute, normal magic power. 700 attack, 700 defense, 700 ultimate skill. Imitation round pupil. From the original 1 star to 2 stars, the 3 measurements have changed from 100 to 700. The killing move, from the only 1 imitation to a new round pupil. I just don't know how much it can be improved under the effect of the Great Sin card with this as a foundation. Why do I feel so excited? Just as Dake was about to summon her out for a closer look, he noticed that she was tugging at his pants with all her might. Good morning, it's time to vote. Sigh. I'm so tired. Row _ Chapter 655. Do you want to change your skin? Dake put little Earbook on his knees and poked its nose. Meow. Little Earbook meowed like a kitten and snuggled into Dake's arms. Dake smiled and took out its magic card. After putting it away, he stacked it with the 2-star Illusory Beast, Earbook, and used a normal summoning spell to summon the 2 cards simultaneously. Finally, he released the summon and successfully transferred Earbook's consciousness to the 2-star Illusory Beast, Earbook. Even though the process was a little complicated, as long as the consciousness was transferred, it was enough to surprise everyone. Dake summoned the 2-star Illusory Beast, Earbook, and high-fived it to celebrate. Then he used Pride 2, Pride 3, and Pride X to experiment on it. The experiment was heartwarming. Under the effects of Pride 2, Illusory Beast, Earbook went from 2-star to 3-star. Its magic attack and defense increased to an average of 1,200 points. It still had 4 surekill skills: Imitation, Eye of the Circle, Assist, and Greater Clear Sky. In other words, compared to the original 2-star Illusory Beast, Earbook under the effects of Pride 2, only its 3 stats increased. This was within his expectations. Under the effects of Pride 3, Illusory Beast, Earbook evolved into Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun, and its star level increased from the original 4-star Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun, to the 5-star Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun. Remember the website, VIP can't you? 6 Its magic, attack, and defense increased to 2, 500/2, 300/2, 000. Apart from that, its surekill skills were still Magic Mirror, Telekinesis, and Future Prediction. Under the effects of Pride, Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun evolved into Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun, and its star level was still the original 6-star. It still couldn't break through from the 2nd tier to the 3rd tier. As for its magic, attack, and defense, they increased to 3,500/3,000/2, 500. These three stats even surpassed Young Cyanide Dragon in terms of magic. As for its sure kill skills, it was Magic Mirror, Telekinesis, Future Prediction, and Cantrips. Dake had some insights from the experiment. Generally speaking, before the complete version of Pride was refined, it would be impossible for Ivan to reach the third step. However, there was still room for improvement in overall strength. Upgrading Illusory Beast Ibu by 3 stars through second refining was no different from upgrading it to 2 stars. Thus, as long as he continued to study it, he would definitely be able to strengthen it to 3 stars. At that time, he might not even need the incomplete version of Pride. Just Pride 3 alone would allow it to evolve into a 6-star, Illusory Beast, Sun Ibu. Moreover, it was Illusory Beast, Sun Ibu, that was basically perfect in terms of magic, attack, and defense. Similarly, it was the same for the other Great Sins. Dake immediately immersed himself in his research after the experiment was over. He wanted to summarize the success of this experiment to ensure that he would succeed the next time. After eating the supper that Aurora sent over, he was full of energy and began the next, second refinement, experiment. This time, the target was still Illusory Beast, Ivan. Then it was 11 o'clock at night. The last Illusory Beast, Ivan's second refinement, was a success. Dake didn't expect his second refinement to go so smoothly. After the 2-star Illusory Beast, Ibu, he successfully created a 3-star, Illusory Beast, Ibu. He quickly grabbed the magic card, rinsed it clean, and immediately injected magic power into it to examine it. Card name, Fantasy Beast Ibu. Type, Elf card. Level, *****. Race, Bird. Attribute, Normal magic power, 1300 attack, 1300 defense, 1300 ultimate skills. Imitation Round Eyes, Receiving Baton. Wish he had just gotten a 2-star skin, and he was going to retire just like that? Dake's breathing quickened as he looked at the brand new magic card that was emitting a golden ball of light. Of course, the one who was breathing more rapidly than him was little Ivan, who was wearing a 2-star skin and dashing over. Squeak! Squeak! That cry of surprise made the magic elves lying on the bed show a look of disdain. Under that disdain, there was a hidden envy. Be gentle. Dake caught Ibu and continued to examine the changes in the magic card. First was the level. Without a doubt, it had become a 3-star. Next was magic power, attack, and defense. All 3 attributes had become an average of 1,300. Illusory Beast, Ibu. As 3 attributes were very average before it evolved, but after it evolved, it would focus on each attribute. From a 1-star attribute of 100 to the current attribute of 1,300. This huge leap was shocking. Although it hadn't reached the peak of the 3-star attribute of 1,500, this wasn't the main point. In the future, he believed that he would be able to create a Illusory Beast, Ibu, with all 3 attributes of 1,500. However, based on the current situation, even if all 3 attributes increased to 1,500, it wouldn't change much. He temporarily put this thought aside and carefully examined the 3-star Illusory Beast, Ibu's ultimate skill. First was Imitation. Imitation. Imitate the opponent's move and use the same move. Illusory Beast, Ibu's imitation was not any weaker than Mystical Flash of the Green Eyes. However, because the previous 1-star and 2-star Illusory Beast, Ibu, had very little magic power, it couldn't unleash the full power of this ultimate skill. If its magic power reached 1,300, it could barely unleash its full power. As for the second ultimate skill, Circle Pupil, although it would be changed by the Great Sin card, the final effect would be similar. Circle Pupil. Use the Circle Pupil to stare at the opponent and reduce their desire to attack. Without the desire to attack, it would naturally be unable to unleash its full power. It was equivalent to reducing the speed and strength of the attack. This ultimate skill had always been very useful. Imitation and Circle Pupil. These 2 ultimate skills had always been in Ibu's system and hadn't changed much. What surprised and delighted Dark were the last 2 new Sure Kill moves. He originally thought that the third ultimate skill would be help, desire, or coquettish, and the last ultimate skill would be another field skill. However, the results were completely unexpected. First was the third ultimate skill. Receive the baton. Receive the baton. Swap with a recorded magic fairy. The swapped magic fairy directly inherits the original ability and some of the effects. The negative effects will be removed during the swapping process. This ultimate skill ignores the effects of the binding effects. The level of the swapped magic fairy cannot be higher than the original level. In other words, as long as Illusory Beast, Ibu was summoned, Receive the baton could be used to swap any magic fairy that wasn't higher than 3-star in the hand or even in the deck. Moreover, the summoned magic fairy could inherit the effects. Illusory Beast, Ibu could also be used to get rid of negative effects and binding skills. And if 3-3-star, Illusory Beast, Ibu cards were placed in the deck, then the entire card set's dispatch would be completely under his control. This was an ultimate skill that might not have any power, but it had a lot of tactical value. After Dark had a thorough understanding of the skill, he looked at the last Surekill skill, Prayer. Wish. Ibu offers a sincere wish to restore half of the maximum magic power of himself, his companions, or the substituted magic fairy in the next turn. It was an extremely rare healing type Surekill skill. The healing effect of Wish was exactly the same as Drink Milk from the milk jug. However, there was a difference in the mechanism. Specifically, it needed to be delayed for 30 seconds. If the target of the activation was himself, Wish could be given to the substituted magic fairy. It could be said that it was perfectly compatible with Receive the Baton. However, in reality, this additional effect didn't have much meaning in a magic duel. This was because the magic elf that had been replaced by Receive was 99.9% of the time at full health. Its main effect was to be used in actual combat. After summoning the injured magic elf and replacing it, it would be able to dispel its negative status and recover most of its maximum mana. Of course, even without this additional effect, just delaying the recovery of half of one's maximum magic power was already a very overpowered ultimate skill. This 3-star, Illusory Beast, Ibu could be said to have maxed out support abilities. Dake immediately transferred Ibu's main consciousness into this 3-star magic fairy card and summoned it on the spot. He then used Receive the Baton and Wish in succession. The effect was very good. After Illusory Beast, Ibu was replaced, there was still some magic power left. The replacement magic fairy was directly instantiated, and the whole process took less than 3 seconds. Wish's MP recovery effect also appeared after 30 seconds. The simplest and most direct combination of this 3-star Illusory Beast, Ibu, was to use Receive the Baton to replace First Dragon Egg. If First Dragon Egg was already present, Illusory Beast, Fusion Curse Creature, Dragon could be used to summon Green-Eyed Tyrant Whelp. A slightly more complicated usage was to use Curse Cage, Little Demon Beast, or Curse Cage, Subancient Beast. However, Curse Cage was different from Illusory Beast. Curse Cage was considered a card of the same name. Only 3 cards could be placed in a magic duel deck. As for Illusory Beast, as long as the type was different, it would not be considered a card of the same name. Dake slowly thought about the composition of the deck that might appear in the future. Then he took out Pride 2, Pride 3, and Pride X, and tried them out one by one. The first choice was Pride 2. It was probably because this 3-star, Illusory Beast, Ibu, had already reached the peak of the first tier. Pride 2 had already lost the effect of increasing its 3 stats. It only replaced the last 2 Surekill skills. As a result, the cost-effectiveness of using Pride 2 on it became extremely low. Unless it needed to use a specific field skill or Surekill skills such as Help, Desire, Act Spoiled, Revenge, it was not suitable to use it. On the contrary, the effect of Pride 3 had already been maximized. Under the effect of Pride 3, this 3-star Illusory Beast, Ibu directly evolved into a 6-star Illusory Beast, Sun Ibu. One had to know that the 3-star Meow Meow could only evolve into a 5-star Boss Cat under the effect of Greed 3. Similarly, the Dream Demon could only evolve into a 5-star Dream Demon. It could be seen that this 3-star illusory beast, Earbook, did indeed have extraordinary evolution potential. Moreover, the evolved illusory beast, Sun Earbook, had already reached the peak in all aspects. Card name, Illusory Beast Sun Earbook. Type, Elven card. Level. Race, Bird Beast. Attribute, Super. Magic power, 3,500. Attack, 3,000. Defense, 2,500. Sure kill skills, Magic Mirror, Mental Strength, Future Foresight, Magic Space. First, the 3 most basic stats. For Illusory Beast, Sun Earbook, the weaker defense had already been strengthened to the strength of Young Cyanide Dragon. Even its attack power was now the same. And its magic power, which was originally its strength, was now a full 500 points higher than a 6-star pinnacle. In terms of stats, the 6-star Illusory Beast, Sun Earbook, was already impeccable. And its sure kill skills had also changed. First, psychic power had become the strengthened Mental Strength. Mental Strength. Send a powerful psychic attack to the opponent, sometimes lowering the opponent's defense. And just like psychic power, Mental Strength could also be used daily before it became an offensive sure kill skill. And the weight of movable items had also been greatly increased. It could be said that the current Illusory Beast, Sun Earbook, was a true Esper. Other than Mental Strength, the biggest change to Illusory Beast Sun Earbook was the addition of a 4th sure kill skill, Magic Space. Originally, if Pride was used to evolve it to 6-star, the 4th sure kill skill would be a sure kill skill that could exchange items on both sides. Tricks. But now it was a sure kill skill with a field. Magic Space. Magic Space. Create a strange space, and all magical items within the space will be nullified. Magic Space lasts for 5 rounds. Like the other field skills of Illusory Beast, Earbook, Magic Space could only last for 2.5 minutes, and its effect was similar to Blissful Longing, Big Sin Armament. But the difference was that it was only effective on magical items, and it didn't make them unusable or disintegrate, but only nullified their magical effects. It was equivalent to an anti-magic space for magical items. And in terms of sequence judgment, it was obviously lower than Blissful Longing, Big Sin Armament. But even so, it was already a very exaggerated sure kill skill. For a sorcerer who specialized in weapons and props, it was a sure kill skill that could be called a deadly nemesis. After a simple experiment, Dake had a very direct understanding of the sure kill skill's effect. Then he tested the strength of Mental Strength again, and took out Pride. Pride didn't reverse, but it didn't further strengthen it. It only replaced Magic Space with Tricks. Other than that, it was completely the same. This meant that for Illusory Beast, Earbook, the broken version of Pride, was already very low in value, and was almost useless. Of course, this wasn't a bad thing. 15 minutes later, Dake waited for Illusory Beast, Earbook the Sun, to degenerate on its own, and then took out Blissful 2, Blissful 3, Blissful 3, Greed 2, Greed 3, and Fury 2. Next, he wanted to confirm the final effects of Blissful 3 and Greed 3. As for Blissful 2, Greed 2, and Fury 2, they were just to test if he could replace the last 2 sure kill skills of Illusory Beast, Earbook. First, Blissful. He first used Blissful 2 to confirm that his judgment was correct, and then continued to use Blissful 3. Illusory Beast, Earbook evolved under the light of Blissful 3. Meow. After evolving into Illusory Beast, Earbook the Fairy, little Earbook suddenly became more clingy. Earbook the Fairy, who was burrowing under the blanket, only revealed 2 resentful eyes. At this moment, it bit the edge of the bed and let out a low whimper. With the appearance of this 6-star Illusory Beast, Earbook the Fairy could clearly feel that it was about to retreat. A strong sense of danger made its mood gradually worse. Dake injected magic into the card, and soon received the information on the card. Card name, Illusory Beast Earbook the Fairy. Type, Elf card. Level. Race, Bird Beast. Attribute, Fairy. Magic power, 3,500. Attack, 3,000. Defense, 2,500. Sure kill skills, Fairy Skin. Deafening Sound. Destructive Ray. Ultimate Impact. Illusory Beast, Ibu the Fairy, which was also magic-enhanced illusory beast, Ibu the Sun, was almost the same in terms of its 3 attributes. However, there was an additional sure-kill skill. It changed from an orange card to a gold card. Moreover, the 4th sure-kill skill also continued its violent style. It was a powerful sure-kill skill. Ultimate Impact. Ultimate Impact. Use all of your strength to attack the opponent. In the next round, you will not be able to move. Ultimate Impact was the same as Destructive Ray. They were both sure-kill skills with terrifying power. Moreover, both of them were sure-kill skills of the normal type and were enhanced by Fairy Skin. The difference was that Destructive Ray was a magic attack. On the other hand, Ultimate Impact was a physical attack. It could be said that Illusory Beast, Ibu the Fairy's attack range had been greatly expanded. 78 of 139. Good morning, I'm so sleepy. Let's cast our monthly votes. Degree, degree, degree. Chapter 656. Since it was late at night and Illusory Beast, Fairy Ibu's killing moves were extremely loud, it was not a good time to experiment. Dake only tested the softness of its belly before preparing for the next evolution experiment. When Illusory Beast, Fairy Ibu reverted back to Illusory Beast, Ibu, he immediately used Bliss 3, Moon on it. The power of Bliss from the Moon God allowed Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu, to successfully evolve into Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu with black fur. Compared to Illusory Beast, Fairy Ibu, Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu was obviously darker than the night. Gentle moonlight was attracted in from outside the window and surrounded its body like flowing water. Dake injected mana into the magic card and checked it carefully. Card name, Illusory Beast Moon Ibu. Type, Elf card. Level. Race, Bird Beast. Attribute, Evil. Mana 3000. Attack, 2500. Defense, 3500. Killing moves, Moonlight, Evil Wave, Black Gaze, Deception. Although Illusory Beast Moon Ibu looked small, it was actually a magic elf specialized in defense. Now that Bliss 3, Moon had evolved, its defense had broken through the peak of 6 stars. As for his sure-kill skill, it had also undergone a relatively large change. Without the ghost type Shadow Ball, it was replaced by the normal Black Gaze and the evil Deception. Although Bliss' symbol, Moonlight, was still retained, its value had increased. Moonlight recovers 1/4 of the maximum mana. Under the Moonlight, it can recover 1/2 of the maximum mana in one go and provide 12 points of mana per second. Compared to the 4 points of mana per second under the Moonlight, the 6-star Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu, now had 12 points of mana per second. This allowed it to walk under the Moonlight without worrying about running out of mana. The other sure-kill skill that was kept was Evil Wave. Evil Wave releases a terrifying aura filled with malice to kill the opponent, sometimes causing the opponent to cower. Wave of Evil was a powerful, AoE sure-kill skill with an abnormal status effect. It had always been very useful, and it was very fortunate that he was able to keep it. Compared to that, Shadow Ball was a single-target burst-type sure-kill skill, but its power was not higher than Evil Wave. Moreover, it was a ghost-type sure-kill skill that did not have any attribute buffs, so it did not match Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu. Black Vision, which replaced it, was much different from the original version. First of all, it changed from the normal to the evil. Secondly, its skill effects had also been adjusted. Black Gaze, Bliss stare at your opponent with a soul-sucking black gaze, causing them to be unable to move in joy and fear. The original version of Black Vision was a functional skill that restricted the opponent and prevented them from escaping from the battlefield. But Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu's Black Vision, was a single-target control skill. Those who were targeted by it could only sink into the contradiction between fear and bliss forever. The downside was that when Black Vision was used, Illusory Beast, Moon Ibu, had to remain still. As for the 4th sure-kill skill, it was not the ultimate sure-kill skill that could be obtained from the Moon Godstone, Hellstab. Instead, it was the core sure-kill skill of Meow Meow. Deceit. Deceit borrows the opponent's strength to attack. The stronger the opponent's attack, the more powerful it is. It had to be said that this was a very big surprise. Deceit's usefulness did not need to be explained. This allowed Illusory Beast, Moonibu, which had high defense and top-tier magic, to gain the ability to defend and counterattack. Another 15 minutes passed. When Illusory Beast, Moonibu had degenerated into Illusory Beast, Moonibu, Dake picked up Greed 2 and began to summon. Greed 2's effect was as expected. It could only change the last two Surekill skills of Illusory Beast, Moonibu, into Desire and Sandstorm. After that, Dake used the normal summoning skill to activate Greed 3. Bathing in the bluish-purple light, Illusory Beast, Moonibu gradually evolved into Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu. Dake rarely summoned Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu in a magician duel, but it was actually very useful, especially the Surekill skill, Mirror Reflection, which could be said to be the nemesis of magicians. Apart from that, the 4-star Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu, also had two Surekill skills, Ice Shard and Blizzard. Now that it had evolved into a 6-star, only Mirror Reflection and Blizzard were left. Card name, Illusory Beast Frozen Ibu. Type, Elven card. Level. Race, Bird/Beast. Element, Ice, Magic, 3500, Attack, 2000. Defense, 3500. Surekill skills, Mirror Reflection, Freezing Beam, Hail, Blizzard. The night was cold, and the appearance of Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu, caused the temperature in the room to drop even further. Dake quickly infused his magic into it and checked its information. Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu, was the same as Illusory Beast, Lunar Ibu. They were both magician elves that specialized in defense. But what was different was that its magic power was also exceptional, but in contrast, its attack power was further reduced. With only 2,000 points of attack power, its average damage was nothing to write home about. Dake turned to look at the Surekill skills of the magician elves. The first Surekill skill was the core, Mirror Reflection. Mirror Reflection. On top of withstanding damage, it can reflect twice the damage of the opponent's magic attack. The second Surekill skill was Freezing Beam. Freezing Beam shoots a freezing beam at the opponent to attack, sometimes causing the opponent to fall into a frozen state. In extreme cold weather such as hail, the probability of being frozen is doubled. A powerful attack skill with an additional probability of controlling the opponent. Not bad. Dake couldn't help but smile. When he was watching the Pokemon anime, one of the scenes that left a deep impression on him was when Ride the Dragon released Freezing Beam. An icy blue beam shot out and froze the opponent into a block of ice. Just thinking about it made him feel good. Unfortunately, as a Surekill skill, the probability of being frozen was not 100%. Even in special weather conditions, the probability of being frozen was at most 20%. Let's look at the third Surekill skill, Hail. Hail was different from Blizzard, which had a short duration. It was undoubtedly a genuine field skill. Hail Greed summons hail, causing the temperature to drop. Each hail has the power to deprive the target of their life force. The hail that continues to fall will cause damage to all magician elves except for the ice attribute. The hail lasts for 5 rounds. The power of the ice attribute Surekill skill is increased by 50%, and the power of the fire attribute Surekill skill is decreased by 20%. Both are Greed field skills. Hail Greed's effect is very similar to Sandstorm Greed. They are both field skills that deal damage. However, the calculation of the damage is different. Apart from the physical damage caused by the falling hail, each hail will cause about 0 to 100 points of true damage. If you don't block and use your Surekill skill, you might be crushed to death by the hail. Moreover, Freezing Beam can increase the probability of being frozen in hail, weather conditions, and its power is increased by 50%. It can be said to be a very powerful Surekill skill. Dake thought about it for a while, then looked at the fourth Surekill skill, Blizzard. Blizzard attacks the opponent with a violent blizzard, sometimes causing the opponent to fall into a frozen state. In extreme cold weather conditions such as hail, the probability of being frozen is doubled, and the duration is increased until the extreme cold weather ends. The maximum duration is 5 rounds, and each round creates a blizzard. Blizzard can be used for 5 rounds? Dake couldn't help but be shocked. Blizzard was already an extremely powerful sure-kill skill, and in hail weather conditions, it could increase its power by 50%. Moreover, it was an AoE skill, so it was extremely powerful on its own. Now with hail, it could last for 5 rounds. This was too much. If the opponent didn't have a sure-kill skill that could dispel hail, they would be at a complete disadvantage. The strength of this illusory beast, Frozen Ibu, seemed to have suddenly increased by another level. After spending some time to record and analyze, Dark only tested the effects of Fury 2 after Illusory Beast. Frozen Ibu had degenerated into Illusory Beast Ibu before ending the experiment. After a whole day of experimenting, he thoroughly experienced the pleasure of accumulating strength. After this, there were still many new magic guide fairies in the planning process. There's still the Golden Cup, tomorrow and the day after, so I should sleep as soon as possible. After washing up, Dake persisted in practicing Underworld Spirit spell for half an hour before quickly falling asleep. The next day, on the second Saturday since the Golden Cup began, this week's schedule was received on Tuesday morning, and on Wednesday afternoon he received a challenge invitation for the following week. According to the rules, he had to reply before the end of this Sunday, or else it would be considered as him rejecting the challenge. However, because he had been too busy these past 2 days, Dake didn't look at it carefully. It just so happened that he had a duel to fight this morning, so he temporarily stopped his research and took out the branch card during breakfast time. After all, it was a challenge against a second-year student, and there weren't many people who were willing to put down their pride. Other than the third-year students who were filled with righteous indignation, there were only a few fourth-year and fifth-year students. Dake glanced at the third-year challenge invitation and found a few familiar names, but he quickly glanced over them. What he was more concerned about were the fourth-year and fifth-year challenges. Overall, there were 3 fourth-year challenges and only 1 fifth-year challenge invitation. However, among the 4 names that had challenged him, 2 of them were quite familiar. Fourth-year Magic Guide, Patricia Bullen. Isn't that the senior wearing the 6th-year Knight Academy uniform at the masquerade ball? What did she say at the time? 5th-year Magic Guide, Patricia Bullen? She's actually a 4th-year student. Dake couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. In the 4th-year Magic Guide, other than Senior Winnie Scardy, there's actually such a character? And this real 5th-year student. Dake couldn't help but open the 5th-year student's challenge invitation again. He saw that the name written on the standard challenge invitation was the 5th-year Academy of Fools, Vern Morse. He also had a deep impression of this 5th-year student from the Academy of Fools. Even now, he still remembered the senior's words before he left. Remember my name. Vern Morse, a name destined to shock the world. Regardless of whether he was overly arrogant or not, a senior who could say such words was definitely not an easy person to deal with. These 2 seniors, which one should I choose? Vern Morse is a 5th-year student. I might not be a match for him now. Although Senior Patricia Bullen is only a 4th year, Senior Snake Harriman is even more difficult to deal with. Sigh, I'll accept both. Failure in the Golden Cup is also a part of the experience. If the competition schedule is always the same as this week, then there's no point in participating in the Golden Cup. Dake tapped the division card, and 2 names appeared on the card. These 2 names were his dual opponents for today and tomorrow. They were both third-year students, and he didn't have much of an impression of them. Ordinary third-year students, whether it was the strength of the magic card or the card deck system, were far inferior to Elsie Casey. Dueling them basically wouldn't yield much. Thinking about it carefully, this can't be helped. From the standpoint of the duel club, they can't always arrange 4th-year and 5th-year duelists for a 2nd-year student. If I don't think of a way, I'll probably be facing opponents of this level in the future. Anyway, I'll go to the duel club first and accept the duel invitation from Patricia Bullen and Vern Morse. Then I'll go to the outdoor duel arena and face today's opponent. Sigh. Kitty sighed. Although the staff members of the duel club were surprised that he would accept the challenge from the 4th-year and 5th-year students, they still respected his personal opinion and submitted the invitation. After that, they would arrange the competition schedule for the next weekend. In the following duel between Dark and the third-year student, he won without any suspense. Although the third-year student was unwilling, he could only admit that his skills were not as good as his opponent. Then he wanted to return to the dormitory and continue the experiment of the second refinement. His goal was to refine 2 more 3-star, illusory beast, Ivan cards. However, not long after winning the duel, he received a text message from his senior from Panduola. "Good morning, my keyboard broke halfway through typing. I was scared to death. Please give me some comfort." Chapter 657. The door card of the secret passage was enough to be used as a communication device. Dake took out the door card and saw Panduola's signature. Then he suddenly had a thought. Is the dragon material ready? He clicked on the message. Sure enough, Dake immediately went to the club's classroom. Panduola Doragon was currently chatting with Katerina Isaiah, who was also a student of the Magical Device Academy, in the Magical Device Academy's classroom. Apart from Katerina, none of the other members of the Magical Device Academy were in the classroom. When Dake rushed over, he saw that Katerina's cheeks were rosy and she was saying something quickly. Panduola was answering calmly, as if she was explaining something. Panduola was an idol, not only on the stage of the Magical Device Duel, but also in the academy. There were as many students of the Magical Device Academy who were in awe of her and saw her as their goal. Website: https://m. Vip can't you? Vita, you're finally here. Panduola stopped explaining when Dake pushed open the door and entered. Katerina looked disappointed. If possible, she would have wanted Dake to come even later, right? Dake sensed her thoughts and walked into the classroom with a smile. Then he said, "Senior, where's the stuff?" He was a little impatient. Compared to the dragon material provided by Panduola, the dragon tooth sword powder that was still in the cabinet was nothing. Panduola pointed at the big backpack on the sofa and said, "It's all there. You can count it and see if it's enough. If it's not enough." Dark, on the other hand, was already walking over excitedly. For him, the cost of activating the intelligence of the magical device fairy was 0. Therefore, there was no such thing as enough or not enough. Dake walked to the sofa, grabbed the strap of the backpack and tried to lift it. Then his expression changed slightly. The backpack was half the height of a person, and its weight was equivalent to half the height of a person. He actually couldn't lift it. He didn't try to hide anything. He pulled the zipper open and lit it up. Needless to say, the pure dragon energy that leaked out from the backpack was not a full bag of dragon scales as he had imagined. Instead, it was a neatly stacked square box. Stacked from the bottom to the top, there were about 10 boxes of different sizes. He first took out the first box from the top and unlocked it on the spot. A truly majestic dragon aura instantly erupted. The one placed at the top was naturally the weakest. It was a dragon pearl as white as jade. Back then, he had spent a total of 30,000 credits to buy an ordinary white dragon ball from his senior from Panduola. According to her, the white dragon pearl was the smallest one in her inventory, and it had neither spirituality nor any special effects. But it was this white dragon pearl that was one of the core materials for refining the young cyanide dragon. And now, this white dragon pearl placed in the box was the size of a palm. The white light emitted from the dragon pearl was pure and beautiful. There seemed to be spirituality circulating inside the dragon pearl. He carefully took it out and placed it in the palm of his hand. He could even feel the dragon pearl beating slightly, just like a heart. This white dragon pearl. Can it also be used as the energy core of the golem? All of a sudden, Dark had such a thought. Panduola had already put down her teacup and walked over. She casually said, "This white dragon pearl's grade can barely be considered high. Because it has been soaked in dragon blood, it has gradually developed spirituality. If it is used to refine a magic fairy, its intelligence level will be slightly higher than ordinary magic fairies. But it's not the most valuable dragon pearl I've prepared. You can take a look at the silver box below." Dake hurriedly took out the silver box from his backpack and unlocked it. A strong white light shot out from the gaps of the box. He couldn't help but squint his eyes and open the lid of the box. Then he saw a white dragon pearl that was slightly smaller than the first one. However, there seemed to be a small white dragon sleeping inside the white dragon pearl. Panduola said, "This white dragon pearl can be considered a top-grade item. The dragon chi inside has already formed an embryo and can nurture a dragon soul. If it's left alone, it may transform into a special kind of gem dragon after decades or centuries." Dake raised the white dragon pearl and looked at it. His face gradually showed some ecstasy. He had an instinctive premonition that this white dragon pearl could be used to refine a blue eyes white dragon. Senior. He was just about to speak. Panduola continued, "My 2 sky white dragons were refined using this method. I'm sorry I can't tell you the formula for its directional refinement." "No need," Dake said slowly. "Every magister needs a different formula for directional refinement. Even if you tell me, it can only be used as a reference." Panduola nodded with a smile. After a long while, Dake reluctantly put the top-grade white dragon pearl into the silver box. "There's still one more white dragon pearl," Panduola reminded him. Dake moved slightly and took out a box beside him. He opened it and said, "Is it this box?" Panduola nodded slightly and said, "Yes, there are a total of 3 white dragon pearls. This one is a high-grade one with special effects." Dake immediately became interested and took it out to examine it carefully. Compared to the previous 2 white dragon pearls, this white dragon pearl was bigger. There seemed to be water droplets inside the pearl, and it emitted a warm and comfortable light. He suddenly thought of the dragon of compassion and asked, "Does it have a healing effect?" "Yes," Panduola said. "Even if it's just placed at the bedside, it can heal fatigue in one's sleep. It's a very useful white dragon pearl." Dake looked as if he had found a treasure and said happily, "I feel that these 3 white dragon pearls are enough." "It's good that you're satisfied." Panduola was slightly relieved. Dake had helped her so much that she wasn't sure if these dragon materials were enough. However, Dake was obviously very satisfied. He then took out the remaining boxes one by one and checked them. Other than the 3 white dragon pearls, there were also 3 dragons reverse scales of different grades. Panduola had already guessed what he was going to use the dragon's reverse scales for, so she gave him 3 sets each. "If that's the case, I'll add 3 more bottles of Fusion Factor and the Fruit of Pride dragon, and I'll be able to use the basic refinement method again. Of course, it's better to be careful with those refinement methods that rely on luck. The 2 high-grade white dragon pearls are still okay, but that top-grade white dragon pearl must be kept to refine the blue eyes white dragon." Dake carefully checked the dragon's reverse scales. He found that these 3 dragons' reverse scales were not much different from the gift Panduola gave him last Christmas. After that, he also opened a bottle of specially processed dragon's blood. However, it wasn't white dragon's blood. This bottle of dragon's blood was colorful and extraordinarily beautiful. He was a little surprised and said, "Could this be the blood of the legendary rainbow dragon?" Panduola nodded and said, "The rainbow dragon is a fairy type of dragon. They are even rarer than the white dragon. I only got 1 bottle of rainbow dragon's blood, so this is for you. A fairy-type dragon's blood." Dake couldn't help but think of the only bird in his Pokémon that had both fairy and dragon attributes. As the super-evolved form of Chi-Chi's blue bird, after its mega-evolution, Super Chi-Chi's blue bird belonged to Bliss. If he used dragon grass Bliss, this bottle of rainbow dragon's blood, and other materials, would there be a chance to refine Super Chi-Chi's blue bird? According to Dake's estimation, the super-evolved Super Chi-Chi's blue bird could theoretically enter the 3rd tier. Of course, for the sake of convenience of summoning, a low-level blue cotton bird was also very good. Also, it was very cute. After opening the dragon pearl, reverse scale, and dragon's blood, Dake continued to open the boxes. Panduola sat on the side and watched with a smile. Katrina didn't even try to avoid arousing suspicion, and brought a small stool over to take a look together. She was obviously very envious of Dake for being able to obtain so many dragon-type materials at once. Dake immediately took out a long box and unlocked it. What caught him off guard was that an extremely evil dark aura leaked out from the gap. "This is..." He couldn't help but open the box, and he saw a dragon tooth surrounded by black aura. Panduola said, "As you can see, This is the tooth of a black dragon. A black dragon? Dake was surprised. Panduola said with a smile. I don't need the materials of a black dragon, so I'll give it to you. This black dragon tooth. Grade isn't low, and it's more than enough to refine a third-tier magic elf. But what can I refine with it? A true red-eyed black dragon? Dake couldn't help but think. However, there were still a lot of materials left, so he immediately came back to his senses and continued to check. In the end, the other long box also contained a black dragon tooth. After these 2 black dragon teeth, he opened a bottle of fire-type, dragon horn powder. From the next box, the dragon horn powder had a flame-like color, and it was said that it was the product of a high-level lava dragon. The first thing that Dake thought of was Little Fire Dragon, one of the first generation's 3 families, even though it didn't have the dragon type. At this point, he had opened a total of 10 boxes. The remaining boxes were stacked at the bottom, and they were all large boxes of the same design. There were a total of 6 of them. The rest are all dragon scales, Panduola said. Dake nodded slightly. Dragon scales were undoubtedly one of the easiest materials of the dragon type to obtain, and they were renewable resources. However, this didn't mean that dragon scales weren't valuable. On the contrary, they were very useful. Among the armors that were made with dragon scales, there were countless famous works that had been handed down from generation to generation. In the remaining 6 boxes, 9 dragon scales were neatly placed in each of them. 2 of the boxes contained white dragon scales. 1 box contained black dragon scales. 1 box contained fire dragon scales. 1 box contained water dragon scales. The last box contained earth dragon scales. Apart from white dragon scales, which were reserved for the directional refining of blue-eyed white dragon, the other dragon scales could be used for the basic refining. I keep having the feeling that after I use up all these dragon-type materials, a complete set of dragon-type cards will be created. After Dake checked all the materials, he asked some questions about how to deal with and preserve them. Only then did he put them all back into his backpack in satisfaction. Then he immediately invited Panduola to have lunch with him. Panduola naturally didn't refuse. However, after she agreed, she also asked Katrina to come along. Katrina agreed with a face full of joy. The 3 of them didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, they chose a high-end restaurant in Traveler's Street. Katrina Lightbulb was very active. She would ask Panduola for advice from time to time. Dake would also occasionally join in the discussion. And so this lunch gradually developed into an academic tea party. After 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they ended the tea party and went their separate ways. Dake also replenished a large amount of experimental materials in Traveler's Street. Then he sighed at how spending money like water, and returned to his dorm with bags of various sizes. As for the bag of dragon breath materials, he had already gotten the magical elves to send them back to his dorm. He called Meow Meow and Mind's Eye Goddess. He was going to ask Meow Meow for help and train Mind's Eye Goddess into an experimental assistant. Mind's Eye Goddess could use X-ray, Mind Peek, and Illusion Break. If these abilities could be used in experiments, she would definitely become the most intimate assistant. Then, they spent the entire afternoon preparing all the materials. Then at night they continued to research second refinement. At this time, their research was very hot. Of course, they couldn't be interrupted so easily. In order to further his experiments, Dake also used the 2-star illusory beast, Ibu, in his experiment. In the end, it was successfully scrapped. As it turned out, last night's success was mixed with too much luck. Tonight, he used a total of 6 strands of illusory beast hair. But he still didn't succeed once. The next day, Sunday, fine raindrops fell from the sky. On Sunday morning, Dake participated in the Gold Cup competition and defeated another third-year student. Then he immediately returned to his dorm and continued to research second refinement. For the entire day, he used a total of 12 strands of illusory beast hair. After all the hard work, there was finally a result. He successfully refined a 2-star illusory beast, multiform monster. Compared to the 1-star illusionary beast, multiform monster, There was only a difference in the stats of the 2-star illusionary beast, multiform monster. The 1-star illusory beast, multiform monster, which originally had 100 points of magic power, attack, and defense, after the second refinement, had increased to 800 points of magic power, attack, and defense. This was quite a big leap. Originally, after using the Great Sin card to upgrade its star level, the 2-star illusory beast, multiform monster, only had 200 points of magic power, attack, and defense, while the 4-star illusory beast, multiform monster, only had 400 points of magic power, attack, and defense. After the second refinement, the 2-star illusory beast, multiform monster, had double the attributes of the 4-star. Dake immediately used Pride 2, Pride 3, and Pride X to experiment. In the end, he found that Pride 2 had completely disappeared from the environment and had no effect on the 2-star illusory beast, multiform monster. Pride 3 could upgrade it to 5-star, and its magic power, attack, and defense had skyrocketed to 2,000 points. This meant that after the illusory beast, multiform monster, transformed into other second-tier magical spirits, it would have higher magic power than some magical spirits, which meant that it was stronger than its original body. No, even without transformation, it could still display enough power. The multiform monster had finally ushered in a turning point in its life. As for Pride X, it could only upgrade the illusory beast, multiform monster, to 6-star, and its attack, magic power, and defense had skyrocketed to 2,500 points. After changing into a new skin with Dake's help, it was obviously very happy, freely transforming into all kinds of magical spirits and having fun everywhere. That night, Dake carried out the last Great Sin card draw for November. For the past 10 days, he had drawn Bliss and Greed, a total of 5 times, increasing his reserves by 10 points of Bliss and 10 points of Greed. The remaining reserves were as follows: Pride. For Greed, 20 Bliss, 10 Fury. 1. His desire to succeed in second refinement caused his greed to grow rapidly, and he had no choice but to draw it. However, even after 10 days of accumulating great sins, the number of great sins he had in reserve was still not much. Now that Soulless Curse could not be used further, and Underworld Spirit Spell was difficult to make progress, if he wanted to obtain more great sins, he had to think of other ways. For this reason, Dake planned to enter the secret passage again after second refinement came to an end. He had the door card, so he could enter and exit the secret passage twice a month. This month, there was still one more time. It was just right for him to explore. However, the prerequisite was that he could obtain satisfactory results before November ended. A new week. Tuesday, November 12th. Dake received a competition notice from the Duel Club when he was browsing the newspaper. Patricia Bolin and Fern Morse's challenge requests had been reviewed by the Duel Club. However, the Duel Club arranged their matches to be this Saturday morning and next Friday afternoon. In addition, on this Saturday afternoon, there was also a battle with a third-year senior. It's not a big problem. Dake put away the branch card and continued to read the newspaper. Wednesday, November 13th. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the branch card rang again. Perhaps it was because he had cleanly defeated 2 third-year students last weekend. This week, the number of third years who had sent in a challenge request had suddenly increased. Among the 10 third-year students, there were even a few who were as famous as Elsie Kevin and Mary Bond. However, Dake only took a glance and ignored them. There was only one fourth year. Fourth year, Noble House, Stuart Fern. Dake had an impression of this senior. The two of them had fought at the Easter Duel Festival. This senior, who specialized in the undying species, was already very difficult to deal with at the Easter Duel Festival. Now that half a year had passed, the strength of his cards must have improved further. Dake gradually became interested. I wonder if he's improving faster, or if I'm improving faster. I'm really looking forward to it. Thus he agreed to Stuart Fern's challenge. No one in the 5th year challenged him. The seniors obviously didn't have that much time to keep an eye on him. If this continued, this kind of good thing might not last. Don't tell me you want me to challenge you instead? Dake couldn't help but shake his head at this thought. This didn't match his usual approach. We'll see when the time comes. He continued to experiment. Thursday, November 14th. Alchemy class started again. Under the guidance of Professor Kazair, Dake successfully created the first golem in his life. Even though it was only a rough golem that was 30 centimeters tall, it already made him very excited. The feeling of piecing them together bit by bit, and then watching them suddenly move was even more realistic and exciting than the creation of the magic elves. He suddenly had the impulse to make his favorite character from his previous life into a golem, and then save it as a figurine. This impulse continued to ferment after this. He inexplicably had more wonderful ideas. For example, after the golem technology was mastered, he could use living metal to refine various characters, marionettes, then use Curse Cage to seal them and use Great Sin Card to unlock their intelligence. Even though if he did this, the characters he refined would most likely be virtual shells without any internal structure. But what if it was Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digital Beast, Pokemon, or other characters that had been integrated into this game world? Even if they didn't have internal memories, they should still retain similar talent traits and personalities, right? Once this idea appeared, it couldn't be stopped. That night, Dake even had a dream of refining Little Wisdom and letting it participate in the duel competition to win the championship. Golems and magic elves were absolutely different. The energy core of a golem could help them survive for a long time. Once Dake's idea succeeded, he only needed to unseal the Curse Cage and let them turn back into golems, and he could obtain a special golem with intelligence. There were many, many more ideas like this. Dake spent a long time calming his mind, but greed increased again. He couldn't help but feel alarmed. But after being alarmed, he continued his research on second refinement. Until November 15th, 24 o'clock on Friday night. Dake used a total of 36 Magic Beast hairs in this week in 5 days. A total of 100 Magic Beast hairs were left with only 30. And in this week in 5 days, his research results were quite fruitful. First, he had a more detailed and comprehensive understanding of various fusion material cards. Next, he once again successfully refined a 2-star Magic Beast, Multiform Monster, and 2 2-star Magic Beast Ibu. But those 2 2-star Magic Beast Ibu became sacrifices, and finally he successfully sacrificed a second 3-star Magic Beast Ibu. With this, he was only one step away from his goal of refining 3 Magic Beast Ibu. Apart from that, there was another surprise. He had successfully created a 2-star Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep. 79 of 139. Good morning, moi. There's only a third of November left. If you don't vote soon, the monthly ticket and blade will expire. Also looking for a type of golem, mechanical type. Chapter 658. Card name Fantasy Beast Fantasy Sheep. Type Elven card. Level 4 all. Race Bird Beast. Attribute Ground Magic Power 500. Attack 500. Defense 500. Ultimate Skill Fusion Finger. Remember the URL. VIP can't you? VIP Fusion Finger. The Fantasy Sheep can replace a recorded fusion material that is not higher than the second tier to participate in the fusion. At this time, the fusion material other than the Fantasy Sheep must be a real fusion material. Transcending levels, and referring to the second tier, the 2-star Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, was just as Dark expected. Just by upgrading it to 2-star, it had already received a huge boost. Using this fusion material, it could replace Polymorphic Monster Green-Eyed Baby Dragon, or Subbeast, to fuse with Green-Eyed Baby Dragon. Although it was not easy to achieve this in the Magician duel because it required fusion cards. However, in actual combat, it could be used to replace Polymorphic Monster, allowing Polymorphic Monster to be more useful. Therefore, the success of second refinement could be said to be a pleasant surprise. However, after this success, Dake realized that there was a crucial element missing in the second refinement of this fusion material card. The main reason why he was able to successfully upgrade Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep from 1 star to 2 stars was because of the fusion factor. He had obtained this potion formula from his senior from Panduola, when he was in his first year. However, after that, if he wanted to go further, he might need more elements. If he could not find those elements, it would be difficult for him to strengthen Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, to 3-star. It was the same for other fusion materials as well. This was a difficult obstacle to overcome. He guessed that he might need to experience advanced fusion before he could make a breakthrough in this aspect. The only fortunate thing was that Fantasy Beast, Goddess of the Heart's Eye, only needed 2-star to upgrade Angel Fusion to the 3rd tier. This would be Dake's trump card in the future. But based on the current situation, if he could refine Magical Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Light, Magical Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dark, and Magical Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon, it would be enough to join the deck. Dake was looking forward to it. Then came Saturday, November 16th. He had been waiting for a long time for a duel with a Year 4 senior, 2nd year aristocrat house, Dake Dimung, versus Patricia Balling, Year 4, School of Magic. The news of this duel had already spread when it was confirmed on Wednesday. Patricia Bullen had quite a reputation in the 4th year School of Magic, although not in a good way. But she was very well known, and Dake Dimung could only become more famous. Therefore, there were many students who came to watch the duel. Most of the junior magi in the 2nd grade who had free time also came. Before the two contestants had even stepped onto the stage, the cheers for them had already rung out. Dake didn't head to the spectator stands. Instead, he went straight to the center of the arena. There weren't many changes to his card deck, other than adding 2 3-star Illusory Beast, Ibu cards and a 2-star Illusory Beast. Ever-changing monster cards. He removed a few 2-star Great Sin cards. But with such a simple adjustment, it greatly improved the connectivity of the entire card set. Patricia Bullen was bound to be a strong opponent, but Dake had a lot of confidence in this duel. He looked at Patricia Bullen from below the stage, and quickly walked up the steps of the red platform. However, Patricia Bullen stepped onto the player platform first, and immediately activated the card table. Then she said proudly, "What do you think? You didn't expect it, did you?" Apart from Dark, no one else at the scene could figure out what she meant by unexpected. But Dake smiled helplessly. "I really didn't expect you to be a Year 4 senior." "That's where my brilliance lies," Patricia said proudly. Pretending to be a Year 6 student at the Halloween masquerade ball had saved her a lot of trouble. At the very least, she hadn't been targeted from beginning to end. It was only Dark who had snatched away her resource points. But it didn't matter. What was lost would be taken back. She said purposefully, "I heard that you haven't lost a single duel since your debut?" Dake frowned slightly and said, "That seems to be the case. But I haven't participated in many duels, so there's no point in counting them." Patricia Bullen smiled and said, "Before I sent out the challenge request, I deliberately collected information about you. It's really hard to believe that you're just a Year 2 student. The upper limit of your card deck is even higher than mine." Dake's eyebrows twitched. He hadn't expected this Year 4 senior, whom he'd only met once, to say something so direct. Patricia Bullen changed the topic and continued, "If we were in a real battle where I could prepare in advance, I might not be your match. But you have to know that this is the stage of a magician duel. The one who can make good use of the rules will be the final victor." As soon as she finished speaking, there was a huge uproar outside the arena. Her supporters probably didn't expect her to admit her shortcomings in such a situation. And many people only just realized that the upper limit of Dake Dimung's card deck was so high that even Patricia Bullen couldn't compare to it. The discussion that resulted from this was like a hurricane that set off a tsunami, quickly erupting in the audience outside the arena. But the two contestants in the arena were very calm. Dake shook his head and said, "In a real battle, it's impossible to give you time to prepare in advance. The rules of a magician duel are different from a real battle, but it's more difficult. How you can't overcome this difficulty is your own problem. I do have a lot of shortcomings. But that's only for now. I'm looking forward to the moment when you reach perfection," Patricia Bullen said with a smile. "I hope that when the time comes, I'll still have the right to stand opposite you. Then let's duel." Dake suddenly said, "Let's duel." Both contestants shuffled the cards at the same time. The words "preparation stage" appeared on the magician duel projection. This duel that started as a challenge, but didn't have the slightest hint of hostility, was about to begin when the countdown for the preparation stage appeared. Whether it was the audience outside the arena or the two contestants in the arena, everyone immediately focused their attention. Preparation stage. 30s. Both contestants drew their cards at the same time. Dake immediately checked after the first 5 cards. Fantasy Beast, Ibu Scabbard Weapon Form. Lion Beast, Greed 3, Flight Incantation. Is the 3-star Ibu's debut finally coming? The instant the 30-second countdown ended, Dake chose to summon Fantasy Beast, Ibu without hesitation. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon Fantasy Beast, Ibu. In the name of Patricia Bullen, I summon Latent Shadow Vine Snake. As the light of the summoning lit up, both contestants had their magician fairies appear in the summoning area at the same time. The 3-star Fantasy Beast, Ibu, was only slightly larger than the 1-star one, but there was almost nothing else that it didn't use. Normal people wouldn't be able to see the difference. Patricia Bullen obviously didn't notice it either. The instant she summoned the Latent Shadow Vine Snake, she immediately shouted, "Take root, Latent Shadow Vine Snake." In an instant, the green snake that was as thick as a child's arm suddenly raised its head. As its tail took root in the ground, its body stretched taut like a stalk and quickly grew longer. With a swoosh sound, it grew from 2 meters to more than 10 meters long. The shadow formed by the illumination of the light directly touched the red summoning area. Dake's expression instantly changed. Even though he hadn't seen this Latent Shadow Vine Snake before, he was keenly aware of its intentions. As expected, an instant later, pitch-black shadow-like vines crazily drilled out from the shadow beside Fantasy Beast, Ibu's feet, and pounced on Fantasy Beast, Ibu, like a swarm of snakes. Mimic. In an instant, Dake suddenly shouted, "Fantasy Beast, Ibu." His eyes instantly lit up. From the shadow of the Latent Shadow Vine Snake, new shadow vines immediately shot out in an attempt to block it. However, the Latent Shadow Vine Snake was activated too quickly. Fantasy Beast, Ibu, was wrapped up like a black rice dumpling in the blink of an eye. Latent Shadow Vine Snake, a Surekill skill, Vine Shadow Bind. It can cut off all connections between your starting magician fairy and the outside world. Patricia Bullen said calmly, "Unable to sacrifice, unable to strengthen, your hand is useless. Now I will summon the magic card again. Ghost Vine Growth. Ibu, use Receive the Baton." Dake immediately gave the order before he activated the second summon. Fantasy Beast, Ibu, who was bound by Vine Shadow Bind, immediately showed an unwilling expression. It knew that Dake definitely had a Great Sin card in his hands. When it appeared, it was already imagining itself evolving into a 6-star magician fairy. However, at this time, it could only respond to Dake's order and activate its Surekill skill. Receive the Baton. Receive the Baton had a limit to the amount of data it could record. However, Dake didn't have many 3-star or lower magician fairies. In the blink of an eye, it turned back into light and broke free from the Vine Shadow Bind. At the same time, a magician card automatically flew out from Dake's deck. The magician fairy that came out of the card immediately materialized in the red summoning area. It was a brand new Fantasy Beast, Ibu. In the name of Dake Dimung, Magician Summoning, Greed 3. A bluish-purple radiance sprinkled down from the sky. Fantasy Beast, Ibu, which didn't have a consciousness of its own, bathed in the radiance of Greed 3, and began to evolve. Fantasy Beast, Ibu, which had a consciousness of its own, returned to its magician card and returned to Dake's hand. This action caused the audience to be dazzled. Patricia Bullen's magician card, Ghost Vine Growth, also took effect at this moment. The Ghost Vine formed from Spectre energy continued to bind Fantasy Beast, Ibu, which was in the midst of evolving, along with Vine Shadow Bind. However, the Vine Shadow Bind, released by Fantasy Beast, Ibu from before, came into effect at this moment. It bought precious time for it to evolve. Fantasy Beast, Icy Ibu, which was emitting a faint blue light, suddenly appeared. Dake hadn't commanded a magician fairy that didn't have sentience in a long time, But he wasn't unfamiliar with it. He immediately yelled, "Freezing beam." In the blink of an eye, fantasy beast, Icy Ibu shot out a freezing beam from its mouth, completely clearing out the ghost vine and vine shadow bind around it. Patricia Bullen's eyes revealed a look of surprise. She then waved her hand, and after the cooldown of her usual summoning spell ended, she raised her third magician card. Originally, according to the sequence, this third magician card could be summoned right after Latent Shadow Snake Vine, but she chose to chase Fantasy Beast, Ibu, and threaten the red magician ball. She didn't expect that Fantasy Beast, Ibu would rely on a special sure-kill skill to escape from its bindings, and it even specially summoned another, Fantasy Beast, Ibu. Patricia Bullen had seen the information. Each of Dake Diming's magician fairies was unique, and there shouldn't be two magician fairies with the same name. However, the law that had been concluded was also broken. Not only did Dake summon two Fantasy Beast, Ibu, but it also evolved into a 6-star, Icy Ibu, that had never appeared before. When Patricia Bullen summoned her third magic card, the temperature of the already cold weather suddenly dropped again. Dark clouds appeared in the sky, and hailstones fell. The latent shadow vine snake and the life barrier of the magician ball in the blue summoning area were both hit by the hailstones. Patricia Bullen suddenly noticed that the magic power of the magician fairy and the life barrier were decreasing. Moreover, the magic power of the magician fairy was decreasing more than the life barrier. If this wasn't dealt with, the latent shadow vine snake would be smashed by the hailstones in less than 10 seconds. But the next moment, the latent shadow vine snake broke through and exploded. On its root, a ghost flower bloomed. Patricia Bullen glanced at the obviously ice-type magician fairy and thought to herself, there's no need to destroy it. Ice-bane grass. She was actually a grass-type magician, but now she was using one of the ghost grass cards. First, dispel this ice-type field skill. Bloom underworld flower. A trace of gray flashed in the corner of Patricia Bullen's eyes. Good morning, that's all for today. After I wake up, I'll update and beg for monthly votes. Chapter 659. Sacrifice flesh and blood to the white bones. Bloom underworld flower. Patricia Bullen abruptly flipped the magic card in her hand. The latent vine snake's body withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. A huge gray flower suddenly bloomed on the corpse. The petals of the gray flower were painted with bright red patterns. The patterns on the 5 petals combined together to form a ferocious ghost face. The decaying aura of the underworld flooded out like a tide. The moment Dake smelled the aura, his right hand trembled slightly. The underworld flame hidden in his hand suddenly had the urge to break free. He immediately clasped his hands together to suppress it as he stared at the underworld flower. This was the first time he felt the aura of the underworld in the academy. However, he was not sure if it came from the underworld flame. Remember this. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. Furthermore, although Patricia Bullen controlled the power that originated from the underworld, she didn't carry out the dual ritual. However, all these doubts made Dake stop thinking. The needle of the clock started to move quickly. Hell's flower was summoned in an unconventional way, spreading its gray aura across the entire field. Immediately after, with the first, underworld flower, as the center, smaller but equally beautiful flowers bloomed one after another. In just a few seconds, half of the blue square field was covered with gray flowers. Patricia Bullen looked up at Dake Diming and immediately gave a new order. Ultimate skill, underworld wave of corpse piling gas. Patricia Bullen's order gave Dake a fright. However, the underworld wave of corpse piling gas released by the underworld flower was not the ultimate skill of the Gold Saints of Cancer. Gray corpse energy burst out from the underworld flowers, which were still increasing in number. The corpse energy gathered together and formed a tsunami-like corpse energy tide that rushed into the sky. The illusory beast, Frozen Ibu's field skill Hailstorm, was dispersed in the blink of an eye. Dark focused his attention, and before the hailstorm was completely dispersed, he gave the command to the Frozen Ibu to use its ultimate skill, Blizzard. Me, magical fantasy beast, Frozen Ibu suddenly roared. and a strong icy blue light burst out from its small body. The temperature in the entire venue plummeted again, and white ice crystals appeared on the ground. The hailstorm clouds were even thicker, and the howling of the wind was accompanied by the falling snowflakes. A terrifying snowstorm descended. Dida. Battle Round 2. 30s. When the duel switched to the second round, blizzard and corpse piling gas wave collided fiercely. Snowflakes and corpse chi collided and neutralized each other. The collision between the ice energy and the ghost energy caused a series of explosions. The underworld flower on the field swayed with the wind, and the corpse gas released from the petals and stamen merged with the corpse gas tide. Not only did it not decrease, but it also gradually increased. Moreover, as more and more underworld flowers covered the blue half of the area, more and more corpse energy was released. Illusionary Beast, Frozen Ibu, S. Blizzard, was showing signs of not being able to hold on. As expected of an item from the underworld, Dake reached out for his card. Underworld Soul Ring, Pride 3. Compared to Patricia Bullen's Underworld Flower, Dake felt that his Underworld Soul Ring wasn't as good. He reached out and summoned Illusionary Beast, Frozen Ibu. Illusionary Beast, Frozen Ibu, returned to his hand through receiving baton, and he could summon it again without replenishing his mana. Illusionary Beast, Frozen Ibu, had its own consciousness, so it didn't take much damage and returned to his hand with almost full health. Now that it was summoned again, Frozen Ibu immediately exhaled, and his gaze became sharp. Patricia Bullen also completed a new summon at this critical moment. The corpse gas accumulated behind her suddenly formed a whirlpool, and a blood-red flower gradually condensed from the center of the whirlpool. The blood-red petals bloomed, and a thick stem like a tree emerged from the stamen. Then a new blood-red flower bloomed at the top of the stem. From the center of the second blood-red flower's stamen, a new stem emerged. Layer upon layer, and in the blink of an eye, a huge plant nearly 10 meters tall grew out of the corpse gas whirlpool. Patricia Bullen looked at the 6-star magic guide fairy in front of her, and a smile blossomed on her face. Plant-type magic guide fairies had a unique advantage when it came to special summoning. It was the same for ghost-type magic guide fairies. In her set of ghost grass, almost all of the high-star magic guide fairies could grow from corpse gas, corpses, and ghost-type energy. As long as the first magic guide fairy was summoned, it could create a hotbed for summoning a second magic guide fairy. With this endless special summoning method, it was almost impossible for her hand to get stuck. The Serene Cloud Tree Flower. In front of her was the same. Serene Cloud Tree Flower was a place where bones grew. It got its name because there were trees within flowers, and flowers within trees. Its petals were like blood-red clouds, emitting a bloody aura. But when the Serene Cloud Tree Flower was summoned, the corpse gas in the blue square field suddenly decreased by more than half. The corpse aura tide that was resisting the blizzard also weakened in an instant. The original advantage turned into a disadvantage, and it looked like it was about to be swallowed up. Patricia Bullen did not care. As long as she could disperse all the hailstones here, she would have achieved her goal. And without the hailstones, the underworld flowers could quickly spread out, and then, Requiem. Her voice suddenly became high-pitched. In that instant, the barrier around the dual field reacted. The underworld flowers that covered the field gave up on supporting the corpse gas tide, and the blizzard also lost its remaining power. The Requiem, which was actually a pollen attack surekill skill, exploded at this moment. From the hundreds of densely packed underworld flowers, countless pollen sprayed out. The pollen drifted with the wind, causing the field of vision to rapidly decrease. Ibu Prey. Dake's command sank like a stone in the sea. In the red square field, Illusory Beast, Frozen Ibu and Illusory Beast. Ibu swayed and collapsed at the same time after inhaling the pollen. In a magic duel, we don't need to defeat the opponent's magic guide fairy. Patricia Bullen's voice sounded faintly. The Serene Cloud Tree Flower that stood in the blue square field also scattered pollen. The blood-red pollen mixed with the gray pollen of the underworld flowers, creating a hypnotic powder with double the effect. If a flesh and blood creature inhaled this powder, Even a third-tier magic guide fairy might not be able to resist the combination of the two 6-star magic guide fairies. Patricia Bullen did not look pleased. She looked more like she was teaching, like a senior taking care of a junior. But Dake Dimming did not need it. He tapped the Pride 3 card in his hand on the table. The Pride 3 card's appearance was very timely, but in fact any Great Sin card could be used to awaken a magic guide fairy from its hypnotic state. But now that the place was filled with pollen, it was very likely that they would immediately fall asleep after waking up. Patricia Bullen's requiem was very troublesome. But this kind of effect usually did not have any effect on mechanical species or steel-type magic guide fairies. And in Dake's hand, there was still a single scabbard card that had not been summoned. Patricia Bullen's two 6-star magic guide fairies were plant-type magic guide fairies that could not move. This was their biggest flaw. The Serene Cloud Tree Flower was fine, but the Underworld Flowers probably did not have any physical attack ability. In other words, its attack power was 0. But at the cost of this, its magic power should be shockingly large, otherwise it would not be able to support the proliferation of so many flowers. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Pride 3. Pride 3's radiance immediately dispersed the haze like a blazing sun. Illusory beast, Ibu, bathed in the dark golden radiance, opened its eyes from its deep sleep. Golden light shone between its eyebrows, and the Pride emblem appeared. Its whole body underwent a transformation the moment it woke up. Amidst the pollen that filled the sky, Illusory beast, Sun Ibu proudly puffed out its chest, and an aura of inviolability appeared between its brows. Under the passive effect of the Sure Kill skill, Magic Mirror, the pure transformation Sure Kill skill, Requiem, was completely useless. Future foresight. Dake Dimming calmly gave the order. Illusory beast, Sun Ibu, who once again stood on the stage, suddenly raised its head. Kilo Bean. The red gem on its forehead immediately released a blazing light that was as bright as the sun, instantly dispersing the pollen around it. Then, a terrifying wave of telekinesis was released, burying itself deep in the sky above the stage. 30 seconds later, this attack that had traveled through the future would descend upon the stage. Illusory beast, Ibu stepped forward with graceful steps. The ghost flowers that had already spread to its feet were annihilated by the powerful telekinesis. Its speed suddenly increased, and it charged toward the underworld flower, in the center of the sea of flowers. Although Sun Ibu was a super-type magic fairy, the source of its power was the sun, so it naturally detested these evil things. Without needing Dake's order, it had already released its Sure Kill skill, Mental Fortitude, at the underworld flower. The powerful telekinesis attack pierced through the underworld flower's thick defense, but it wasn't damaged at all. Instead, a large number of underworld flowers rapidly withered at the edge of the stage. Damage transfer? Dake instantly came to a conclusion. Then he immediately ordered, attack the magic conducting ball. Ever since the mock duel in the first grade, Dake had been very clear about the core of a magic conducting duel. Just as Patricia Bullen had said, in a magic conducting duel, it wasn't necessary to defeat the opponent's magic conducting fairy. Soon, Patricia Bullen's two magic conducting fairies were the type that couldn't move. Cloud Tree Flower. Tree Dragon's Descent. In that instant, the huge flower tree that was 10 meters tall let out a roar that plants shouldn't let out. From the ground beneath its feet, the earth rumbled, and thick roots emerged one after another. Those roots were wrapped in pitch-black energy and entangled into a dragon. The tree dragon, that was more than a meter thick, suddenly let out a roar. Although it didn't have the aura of a dragon, the unique aura of danger of the ghost element was still terrifying. However, Sun Ibu, which was charging straight in, released an even more powerful Mental Fortitude, firmly nailing the huge tree dragon in the air. Then it quickly approached the blue magic conducting ball. On the blue side's platform, Patricia Bullen didn't use remote control to lift the magic conducting ball into the air. Instead, she drew a card from her hand and summoned it on the spot. In the name of Patricia Bullen, I summon Plant Trick. A green radiance erupted from the surface of the magic card. It first illuminated the blue side's summoning area, and then continued to illuminate all corners of the field. Whether it was the cloud tree flower or the underworld flower, they were all surrounded by a pale green halo under the effect of the magic card. Then, below the blue magic conducting ball, the underworld flower suddenly straightened its stem. Its thick petals were like a giant mouth, surrounding and swallowing the magic conducting ball that was obviously larger than its flower bud. The blue cube magic conducting ball disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Patricia Bullen said calmly, "It won't be easy to attack my magic conducting ball." Delebian, illusionary beast, Sun Ibu, suddenly raised its head and glared fiercely at this bad woman. Then, without hesitation, it pounced on the cloud tree flower. In front of it, the tree dragon was bound, and the serene cloud tree flower almost lost its ability to resist. However, its bark seemed to be extremely tough, and it was partially immune to physical damage. Illusory beast, Sun Ibu's claw attack only left a few shallow scratches on the tree bark. Dake Deming looked down at the stage and frowned slightly. Patricia Bullen did have a lot of tricks up her sleeve. This plant trick reminded him of a certain card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unfortunately, the magic conducting duel was not a real card game. No matter how well you hid your target, you would not be able to avoid a sure kill attack that covered the entire stage. Dake casually summoned Scabbard weapon form and made it turn into an elf. In the magic conducting duel, archmages were not allowed to personally control the item cards, including weapons and equipment. But if it was a magic card, they could control it. This rule was very beneficial to a certain magic card called Fantasy Weapon Incantation. Dake had heard from Aunt Claire that a certain archmage who was very proficient in Fantasy Weapon Incantation had once used this card to show his prowess in a magic conducting duel. However, Scabbard could turn into an elf, so he did not need to personally control it. "Prepare to fire," Dake ordered in a low voice. Scabbard slightly nodded its sword tip and was ready to fire. The second round passed in the blink of an eye. The third round, both sides drew their cards at the same time. Primordial Dragon Egg, Fox Demon Beast. Dake Diming's hand was not ideal. Primordial Dragon Egg was a very crucial magic elven card in his system. But in the current round, it was not easy to summon it. The hypnotic pollen that filled the air would hypnotize it the moment it hatched. Patricia Bullen's setup was indeed very suppressive. Once she was able to maintain this situation and draw an offensive type magic elven card, this duel might immediately end. Just as Dake was thinking about this, Patricia Bullen had indeed activated the summoning. But it was not a magic elf card, but a magic card with a defensive effect. It's called Future Foresight, right? I know that your magic elf can release a large-scale spell attack with a delay of 30 seconds. Patricia Bullen said calmly after summoning the magic card. Because Future Foresight was above her head, she did not summon a new magic elf. In front of the blue player's platform, a huge bony hand made of vines appeared. The Hand of Vines magic card was activated on the spot. The Hand of Vines extended its index finger, and the light released from its fingertip was like a mirror that radiated across the entire arena, separating the sky from the ground. Patricia Bullen's magic card was a defensive magic elf card that she was accustomed to using. It was usually used to protect key magic elves or magic orbs. It was not weak. It was equivalent to a 4-star magic elf with 2,000 points of defense and 2,000 points of magic power. But if the defensive barrier extended too far, the defensive power would decrease proportionally. But she had misjudged the power of Future Foresight. The current illusory beast, Sun Ibu, was no longer a 4-star magic elf. It was a genuine 6-star king. The Future Foresight it released could easily shatter the Hand of Vines magic barrier. In the sky above the arena, a golden ball of light that looked like the sun appeared without warning. The ball of light instantly exploded, releasing blade-like beams of light downwards. The thickest beam of light directly shattered the Hand of Vines magic barrier. Then countless tiny beams of light continued to be released from the golden ball of light. Every beam of light seemed to have a guidance system, accurately shooting at all the blue magic elves on the arena, including every underworld flower. Because of the large number of underworld flowers, the concentrated beams of light almost covered the entire arena with golden light, not leaving a single gap. When the light finally disappeared, All the underworld flowers that had multiplied in the arena turned into magic fragments along with the pollen that filled the sky. In an instant, the arena was cleared, giving people a feeling of suddenly opening up. The underworld flowers that only had a little bit of HP left lay on the ground, probably unable to use any abilities. The only thing that was still standing was the cloud tree flower, in the blue summoning area, but its stem trunk was already full of holes. And the blue magic orb was still nowhere to be seen. The single scabbard, which was ready to shoot out at any moment, was slightly stunned. But Illusory Beast, Sun Ibu, was extremely decisive. It did not hesitate to attack the cloud tree flower next to it. Its attack power was as high as 3,000 points. Even though part of the damage was reduced by the tree bark's immunity and was offset by its defense, but there were no buts. Illusory Beast, Sun Ibu was still unable to break through the cloud tree flower's defense. Although the cloud tree flower's magic power was not as thick as the underworld flower's, its defense was stronger. But anyone with a discerning eye could see that Dake Dimming had shown an overwhelming advantage in the current situation. The arena that Patricia Bullen laid out using so many magic orb cards had been completely destroyed, and Dake Dimming's 3 magic elves were all still there. If she did not have a trump card to hide, this duel would most likely end in garbage time. Of course, this kind of situation wouldn't normally occur with such an outstanding 4th-year student of the Magic Engineering Department. Patricia Bullen did not panic because of the withering of the underworld flower. She was still calm and collected. As the magic power fragments drifted in the air, she pulled out a new magic orb card and quickly summoned it. Future Prediction has been released. No matter how much stronger that magic elven is, after removing 2 active skills and 1 passive skill, it only has 1 ultimate skill left. And since it did not break through the cloud tree flower's defense, it can be seen that its last ultimate skill is of the functional type. If that's the case, then be bolder. What's that saying again? Put yourself in a situation of death and fight to live. Patricia Bullen completed the summoning. On top of the serene cloud tree flower, a dark green egg appeared from the summoning array. For plant-type magic elves, there was a non-plant-type magic elven that could form a very effective connection with it. That was a phoenix. A phoenix lived on a parasol tree and was reborn from nirvana. Patricia Bullen's trump card was a Ghost plus Fire magic elven called the Ghost Fire Phoenix Egg. This was a relatively rare Fire Elven magic elven card among all her magic elven cards. If he wanted to hatch the ghostly Fire Phoenix Egg, he could choose from 3 different types of energy. They were the ghostly element, the fire element, and the grass element. Therefore, it was very compatible with the Ghost Grass series of cards. However, the time it took to hatch was relatively short. It was 10 times longer than the Primordial Dragon Egg, which was 30 seconds. When it was reborn from nirvana, it was also the time when the parasitic plant withered. The Ghost Fire Phoenix Egg, born from this, would be affected by the level of the parasitic plant, and hatch a Ghost Fire Phoenix of the corresponding level. The Cloud Tree Flower was level 6. If it successfully hatched, the Ghost Fire Phoenix would be level 8. This was the limit of this Ghost Fire Phoenix Egg. In addition, even if the Ghost Fire Phoenix Egg failed to hatch, she still had a backup plan, as long as she drew that card. Hold on for this round, Cloud Tree Flower. The Cloud Tree Flower swayed its petals as if it was responding. The tree dragon that it had summoned had already been destroyed by Sun Ivan. It only had petals and no branches, so it could only rely on its supermodel defense to protect the Ghost Fire Phoenix Egg and the blue magic ball that was hidden in its body by Plant Trick. It had a heavy responsibility. However, the single scabbard had already been officially launched under Dake's command. The single scabbard, no longer confused, shot out like a flying sword. Its momentum skyrocketed as it accelerated, but it did not use sword dance. The Cloud Tree Flower displayed a terrifying defense, so it decided to use sword dance at the end. Facing an immobile target, its triple slash could not miss. Drip. When the 4th round began, the single scabbard's first slash happened to hit the Cloud Tree Flower. Even if it chose the part of the petals that seemed to have the weakest defense, It could only cut a harmless white mark. However, it was the second slash. The second slash, with its attack power increased by 50%, finally caused damage to the petals. But it still didn't help. It suddenly spun in the air, and the terrifying momentum accumulated by the double slash instantly erupted, and a strong airflow wrapped around the sword. Triple slash plus sword dance equals 200% basic attack increase. This slash suddenly passed through the petals of the cloud tree flower and cut toward the ghost fire phoenix egg on the top of the tree. Facing this incomparably sharp slash, the ghost fire phoenix egg's eggshell emitted an extremely strong dark green light. The blade of the single scabbard suddenly felt the same stickiness as when it cut the cloud tree flower. Then this 3-star ghost fire phoenix egg was cut in half by it. The egg liquid of the ghost fire phoenix egg suddenly sputtered out. The rest flowed down the crown of the serene cloud tree flower. Roar! A slightly immature dragon roared out. The cyanide baby dragon, hatched from the original dragon egg. It spread its wings and floated in the air, looking around curiously. The remaining fragrance in the air made it a little allergic. Chirp! It yawned abruptly. Single scabbard. Transform into a weapon form. The single scabbard, which had completed its mission, suddenly flew back. Then, when it transformed into a weapon form, it automatically flew into the claws of the cyanide baby dragon. Although triple slash and sword dance had been used, just the increase in attack power was enough to make it the best weapon. After the cyanide baby dragon was equipped with the single scabbard, its highest attack power could reach 4,800 points. Unless the cloud tree flower was immune to more than 37.5% of physical attacks, it would definitely be able to break through the cloud tree flower's defense. But when it came up with its sword, on the blue team's platform, Patricia Bullen showed a slightly relaxed expression. Although she actually did not care much about the final outcome of this duel, she had stood in the position of a senior and said so many words of advice before and after the duel. If she lost in the end, it would still be a little embarrassing. Therefore, she was very satisfied that she was able to draw this magical beast, Ghost Plant, at this crucial time. Magical Beast, Ghost Plant, was naturally the first magic elf card that she had refined in her first year. The 1-star, Magical Beast, Ghost Plant, was very incompatible with Patricia Bulling's card set in terms of strength, and it could not help with special summons. However, this magic elf card could create a miracle at a critical moment. She needed such a magic elf card so that she would never give up hope when she was in a desperate situation. Card name, Magical Beast Ghost Plant. Type, Elf card. Level, Race Plant. Attribute, Ghost/Grass. Magic Power, 100. Attack, 10 Defense, 100. Ultimate Skill, Sticky Potion. This illusory beast, Ghost Plant, only had one sure kill skill. It could turn itself into a adhesion potion and forcefully stick the ghost element and grass element magic guide spirit together. Although it was not comparable to fusion, it was still a method of fusion. Generally speaking, it was based on Elsie Kevin's mechanical seed assembly and fusion technique. In Patricia Bullen's Ghostgrass deck, most of the enchanted fairies were a combination of Ghostgrass and Ghostgrass. This meant that under most circumstances, she could stick any two magic guiding fairies together. Although the Ghost Fire Phoenix egg was not a grass element, it was a ghost element. The Ghost Cloud Tree Flower was a grass plus ghost element, and it could be regarded as a grass element among the magic elementals. Even if the Ghost Fire Phoenix egg was shattered, its egg liquid still had powerful magic power. Patricia Bullen summoned Phantasmal Beast, Spirit Plant, without a second thought. This was a magic elf that looked like a grass slime. It had a slimy green body and a pair of small ghost wings. As soon as it was summoned, it pounced on the Ghost Cloud Tree Flower and helped it stick to the egg liquid of the Ghost Fire Phoenix egg. Then the body of the Serene Cloud Tree Flower began to burn with dark green ghost fire. It moved suddenly and pulled out its roots from the ground. Then it started to move. The egg liquid that was stuck to it turned into a pair of burning phoenix wings. It was not as good as the original body, but it was extremely important to the Ghost Cloud Tree Flower. In the end, the phoenix's claws extended out of the Ghost Cloud Tree Flower's body. This strange-looking magic elf that was stuck to the ghost cloud tree flower launched a frontal attack on the blue team. The green-eyed young dragon held the scabbard and pounced. The two magic elementals that were both 6 stars, but their strength had surpassed that of 6 stars. They started a fierce battle on the field. After the ghost cloud tree flower was stuck to the phoenix egg liquid, its defense and immunity did not increase, but its attack power increased from 0. It was no longer a meat shield that could only take a beating and not fight back. On the red team's platform, Dake Deming looked at the magic elf card in his hand and muttered to himself, "Magical beast, ever-changing monster. Bliss 3 month, it's a pity that I didn't get fusion." Summoning a 9-star green-eyed dual explosive young dragon on the duel stage should make more seniors take the initiative to challenge me, right? It's a pity that there are no ifs. Dake shook his head and summoned the demon fox. If Bliss 3 month was used to strengthen the magical beast, ever-changing monster, it would at most transform into the green-eyed young dragon, or the ghost cloud tree flower. But if it was used to evolve the demon fox, then he would get a fire elemental attacker. Fire elemental counters grass. This was the correct choice in the textbook. After all, not everyone could be crowned with the title of Master of Inverse Attributes. Both teams did not stop. Dake summoned the demon fox in the red team's summoning area and used Bliss 3 month to evolve it into the 9-tailed fox. The magical beast, Sun Ibu, that was still active on the field sent the dying flower of the underworld back to the underworld to put an end to any possible problems. A ghost card deck would usually be accompanied by a resurrection-type mystic ritual card. Dake did not want to see that sky full of pollen again. After the flower of the underworld was destroyed, Patricia Bullen showed a trace of regret. Of course, she did not have the relevant magic guide card at the moment. She was in the blue team's summoning area and took the opportunity to summon a fruit tree. It was a 3-star magic guide sprite called the Mother-Child Ghost Tree. The Mother-Child Ghost Tree also had 0 attack, magic power and defense specialization. One of its sure kill skills was to consume its own magic power to quickly grow fruit. After the fruit fell to the ground, it would transform into a 1-star to 3-star Ghost Child. The Ghost Child's star level was very random. Although they were not strong, each one of them was an independent entity after falling to the ground. When Fairy Ibu finished off the flower of the underworld and returned, Patricia Bullen had already used a sacrificial summoning spell to summon a 6-star magic guide sprite, Imitation Ashwood Spirit. It was the fusion of a grass elemental seed and a ghost, one of the legendary life forms that wandered the banks of the river Styx. It was the complete opposite of Patricia Bullen's magic guide sprites that had 0 attack. This Imitation Ashwood Spirit had magic power and attack specialization, but its defense was 0. However, just like Deanna's Spirit Bear, it was immune to physical attacks. Its sure kill skills were Claw of Curses and Imitation Ashwood Curse. Claw of Curses was a strengthening type sure kill skill that gave the Imitation Ashwood Spirit a stronger attack. Imitation Ashwood Curse was a curse. As long as the Imitation Ashwood Curse was planted, even a 3-star magic guide sprite would gradually become an unconscious wandering spirit in the process of the curse taking effect. They would no longer be able to respond to the Archmage's orders, and would no longer be aggressive. As long as they were not stimulated, they could be left alone. The target of Patricia Bullen's curse was the 9-tailed demon fox. Although the combination of cyanide baby dragon and single scabbard was powerful, it was far from the threat that the 9-tailed demon fox could bring. The Hall of Light that it released during the battle also did not cause any substantial negative effects to her magic guide sprite. However, before the Imitation Ashwood Spirit could cross half of the field, the fox fire dragon condensed from blue flames had already roared and rushed over. Imitation Ashwood Spirit dodge. The Imitation Ashwood Spirit was extremely fast, and dodging the fox fire dragon's attack was not a problem. However, just as it was about to dodge, a collar burning with gray flames suddenly appeared on its neck. Then the huge flame dragon completely swallowed its body. "This is..." Patricia Bullen suddenly frowned. "Good morning. 9,000 bursts. Requesting votes. Requesting blades. Chapter 660. The Underworld Soul Ring could only restrain second-tier magic guiding fairies for a short period of time, and it couldn't be sacrificed. However, one of its huge advantages was that it could be unleashed instantly, and it could be used as a long-range sure-kill skill. The imitation Ebony Soul's defense was 0, and it was Grass-type and Spirit-type. The Fox Flame Dragon's effect was outstanding. Even though it used the Claw of Curses at the most critical moment to counteract part of the flames, it still couldn't withstand the Ghostfire Jade's bombardment. Just like that, this powerful 6-star magic guide fairy was annihilated as soon as it appeared. After that, the nine-tailed fox's target turned to the Serene Cloud Tree Flower, which was stuck to the Phoenix Egg liquid. At this point in the duel, the Dake Dimming had completely suppressed Patricia Bullen. Once the nine-tailed fox unleashed its most terrifying sure-kill skill, the Heavenly Dog, the Serene Cloud Tree Flower, which was completely countered by the nine-tailed fox, would definitely not be able to withstand it. Patricia Bullen had already used up all her cards, and she had no more skills to use. However, the outcome of a duel would never end here. As long as the magic guiding ball's life barrier didn't shatter. Website. https://m. VIP VIP duelists would always have a next round. 5th round card draw. Patricia Bullen's thoughts were running wild, but the speed at which she drew cards wasn't slow at all. The mother-child ghost tree was still standing, and ghost babies were continuously born and falling to the ground. After these ghost babies landed, they shrank behind the mother-child ghost tree and huddled together to hide. They were the best sacrifices. As long as the mother-child ghost tree's magic power wasn't depleted, Patricia Bullen could continuously summon second-tier magic guiding fairies using sacrificial summoning. If she had third-tier magic guiding fairies, she could also sacrifice the mother-child ghost tree as a sacrifice. As long as it had more than half of its magic power left, the sacrificial summoning wouldn't fail. Patricia Bullen had already shortened the sacrificial summoning time to the limit of 3 seconds, which was the same as ordinary summoning. To her, summoning high-star magic guiding fairies was very easy. However, she didn't draw a magic guiding fairy card in the 5th round. Patricia's frown deepened as she looked at the secret instrument card and magic card in her hands. It wasn't that she couldn't use them, but there was no way to reverse it. Let's think of a way to survive this round. With that thought in mind, she slowed down her usual summoning speed and poured a large amount of mana into the magic card that she had just obtained. The more mana he infused, the better the effect of this magic card would be. In fact, if she didn't inject enough magic power at this time, it wouldn't be strong enough for her to last until the next round. At this moment, Illusionary Beast, Sun Ibu charged towards the mother-child ghost tree, under Dake's command. Even if the defense of the mother-child ghost tree made it impossible for Sun Ivan to attack it, the ghost infant it produced didn't have much fighting power. Eliminating these ghost babies would stop Patricia Bullen's sacrificial summoning. On the other hand, the nine-tailed fox was already preparing the Tengu. The situation was at a critical juncture. Dark Diamond also quickly looked at the 2 magic cards that he had just obtained. Kettle, Fuse. Other than that, he also had Fantasy Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, Lion Beast, and Flight Spell. Fuse? Dake looked at the green-eyed dragon whelp in the field. With Fuse in hand, the Fantasy Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, S existence made the green-eyed tyrant dragon whelp S appearance possible. Although the green-eyed tyrant dragon whelp was also a 6-star, its strength was not inferior to an 8-star. If he could summon the green-eyed tyrant dragon whelp in this situation, he would have the ability to end the match. However, the current situation was too smooth. As long as the nine-tailed fox released the Tengu, the Serene Cloud Tree Flower would definitely not be able to block it. The whereabouts of the blue square magic ball that was hidden in the Serene Cloud Tree Flower, by plant trick, would also be exposed. The green-eyed dragon whelp could end the match in the blink of an eye. Let's wait and see. Dake squinted slightly and had a plan in his mind. Considering that he would have to face the 5th-year seniors for the first time next week, he needed to hide some trump cards. Although he accepted the challenge with the mentality of not caring about winning or losing, when he really started to prepare, there was only one goal in his mind. It was under such circumstances that the nine-tailed fox suddenly let out a long roar and condensed the flames on its body into a huge energy ball. When the energy output reached its limit, the nine-tailed fox shook its head and the huge fireball above its head instantly shot out. The green-eyed dragon whelp, which had already sensed it, quickly swung away the serene cloud tree flower's attack and flapped its wings to retreat quickly. The serene cloud tree flower was huge and moved slowly. Even if it had phoenix wings, it was still a living target. Boom! The Tengu hit its target. A huge blue flame rose up. In the blink of an eye, the serene cloud tree flower was completely engulfed by the flames. The egg liquid of the serene fire phoenix did not give it too much fire attribute. It let out a painful cry in the explosion of the flames. The magic power that represented life rapidly decreased. At this moment, Patricia Bullen, who had long calculated that the nine-tailed fox would use Tengu, finally activated the magic card that she had been accumulating power for a long time. Activate magic card. Giant Tree Fortress. From the surface of this magic card, an extremely terrifying strong light instantly burst out. A huge magic array that covered the entire blue half of the field instantly spread out on the field. The entire ground suddenly wriggled crazily, and thick tree roots drilled out from the ground one after another. Surrounded by these tree roots, countless giant trees covered in green moss rose from the ground, transforming the blue half of the field into a fortress of giant trees. Although the serene cloud tree flower had been destroyed, the mother-child ghost tree had survived. The fantasy beast, Sun Ivan, which was in the blue half of the field, was fiercely thrown away by the thick tree roots that popped out from the ground. Patricia Bullen's giant tree fortress displayed extremely high skill. Just the defensive ability of this giant tree fortress alone was probably not weaker than a third-tier magic elf. And the blue magic ball that reappeared because of the sudden death of the serene cloud tree flower quickly retreated and was protected in the giant tree fortress, together with the mother-child ghost tree. However, the magic card that had created this terrifying scene was only a stopgap measure to stall for time. Wielding the single scabbard, the young blue-eyed dragon broke through the giant tree fortress's defense with just one charge. Its defense was not stronger than the serene cloud tree flower's. However, Patricia Bullen activated a secret instrument card in her hand at an extremely fast speed. The mother-child ghost tree began to take root in the fortress and fused with the giant tree fortress. The magic power that Patricia Bullen had poured into the giant tree fortress was continuously absorbed by the mother-child ghost tree. One fruit after another grew on the tree crown. More ghost babies fell to the ground and then scattered after receiving orders. The fantasy beast, Sun Ivan, was still in the giant tree fortress, and it immediately used its telekinesis to grab the ghost babies. However, the 1- and 2-star ghost babies were still fine. The 3-star ghost babies struggled hard and broke free from its grip. After doing all this, Patricia Bullen immediately reached out and pointed at the magic conducting ball. She used all her strength to control the magic conducting ball to avoid the young blue-eyed dragon's attack. However, after seeing the situation clearly, Sun Ivan decisively gave up on suppressing the ghost babies and used its telekinesis to join in the chase. Its telekinesis was generated based on the strong mental force, sure kill skill, and it was much stronger than before. In addition, Dake Dimming also released its magic power and joined in the chase. The blue square magic conducting ball could not be avoided. Patricia Bullen made the best choice she could and managed to drag it out until the 6th round. However, at the beginning of this round, she completely lost control of the magic conducting ball. This made her sweat on her forehead, and she could not help but take a step back. Her finger had already pressed on the magic conducting card at the top of the deck. However, these 2 magic conducting cards could no longer be drawn. With 2 consecutive slashes from the young blue-eyed dragon, the blue square magic conducting ball's life enchantment was instantly shattered. The blue square magic conducting ball's magic power was reduced to 0. Beep! The referee blew the whistle at that moment. At the same time, The audience let out cries of wanting to continue. This unusually intense duel had piqued the interest of a large number of audience members at the beginning. However, when the colossal tree fortress rose from the ground and the audience was looking forward to the next development, the match unexpectedly ended. In the end, Patricia Bullen did not achieve her goal. She did not really drag the duel to the next round. This kind of miscalculation was actually very common in duels. However, the appearance of the colossal tree fortress gave the audience the illusion that she still had a trump card. In reality, Patricia Bullen had completely lost. Whether it was luck or strength, she had already ushered in defeat in this duel. I originally wanted to win one round before he really matured and leave a beautiful memory for the future. Looks like there's no other way. Patricia Bullen's eyebrows immediately relaxed. After the referee announced the winner, she said, "I didn't expect to lose. If I knew this would happen, I would have participated in the Easter Duel Festival last semester." Her tone was full of regret. Hearing this, Dake felt a little ashamed. Patricia Bullen continued, "Seeing as I lost miserably, can you invite me to lunch?" Hearing this, Dake suddenly frowned and said, "What's the matter?" Of course, he wouldn't agree to an invitation to have lunch together on this duel stage where everyone was watching. However, at this moment, the corner of Patricia Bullen's eyes lit up with gray flames. The flames danced wildly and emitted an evil aura. Dake narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Let's go down first." Then he quickly recalled the magic conducting sprite, stacked the used magic conducting cards neatly, and prepared to go down the stage. On the other side, Patricia Bullen smiled slightly, tidied up the cards, and quickly went down the stage. The two sides did not say much on the stage and left the stage. After going down the stage, the two reunited in the contestant passageway. "This is the third time we meet." Patricia Bullen waved at Dake and revealed a sweet smile. Dake quickly followed her. "Is there anything you want to say?" Patricia Bullen raised a finger to her lips and made a sh sound. Then she said, "Are you really not going to treat me to something to eat?" "Let's get down to business," Dake said in a methodical manner. Then he turned his head slightly and said, "There is a classroom for my club on the clock tower." "The Magical Animal Club, right?" Patricia Bullen nodded. "Then let's go there." Next, the two of them walked side by side toward the spiral clock tower. When they finally reached the 10th floor of the spiral clock tower, Patricia Bullen said in disappointment, "I didn't catch anything. What's wrong?" Dake's eyes revealed a puzzled look. "Let's go to the classroom first." Patricia Bullen pointed at the classroom door. Dake opened the door. The little anti-birds and catnip plants that were chasing each other in the living room instantly stopped. When they saw that it was Dake, they all turned around and pounced on him at the same time. Dake dealt with the little cuties while saying to Big Milk Can, who was guarding beside him, "Make some snacks." Moo. Big Milk Can patted his little apron and turned around to leave. After a while, a pot of fragrant black tea was placed on the guest table. Big Milk Can also brought a plate of biscuits. Dark poured a cup of black tea for senior sister Patricia. Then he went straight to the point and asked, "Where did you get your underworld fire?" Patricia Bullen looked up at him and asked, "What about you?" Dake smiled and decided to show his sincerity. "Angus Jeffrey. You should know him, right?" Patricia Bullen was slightly surprised. "The former president of the Aristocrat Research Society?" Dake nodded slightly and said, "Yes, I had a duel with him during the holidays." Patricia Bullen immediately understood. "So that's how it is. You won the duel ceremony," Dake said calmly. "Since you even know about the duel ceremony, I don't need to say more about the danger of this underworld fire. Tell me, how did you get it?" Patricia Bullen picked up the biscuit and took a small bite. Then she said, "My experience is somewhat similar to yours, but it's also different." Dake was curious. "What do you mean?" Patricia Bullen said, "During the holidays, I attended the Demon King execution ceremony held by the Holy Church. Then I obtained an underworld fire. I didn't expect you and I to have the same name." Dake was non-committal. "After all, it was leaked from the gate of the underworld," Patricia Bullen said. "Although I don't know how that person found me, on the second day after the execution ceremony, Someone who also obtained an underworld fire came to find me. Then, I obtained a second underworld fire. Good morning. That's all I can write today. I'm exhausted. My fingers are hurting more and more recently. I haven't dared to open my Diamond Pearl copy for 48 hours. I'm starting to fight for my dream, but it doesn't seem to be going well. I don't even have a monthly ticket. Chapter 661. The next day, Dake was somewhat surprised. Patricia Bullen nodded slightly. After being possessed by the underworld fire, it will emit a unique aura that only the possessor can sense. Although I couldn't sense it from you at all, it was indeed so at the time. As soon as that person approached, he and I sensed each other's presence, and we both had the fervent desire to duel him. After understanding, Dake said calmly, "So that's how it is. And I wasn't possessed." Patricia Bullen immediately revealed a look of surprise. "But you weren't." Dake stretched out his hand, and a gray flame burrowed out from his palm, burning fiercely. Patricia Bullen instantly sensed the unique aura of the underworld fire, but soon after, she was even more surprised. "How did you do it?" Dake smiled slightly and closed his hand, taking the underworld fire into his palm. "Just make it submit." Patricia Bullen. Dake changed the topic, saying, "Then what about you? How did you hide your underworld fire? Since you knew of its existence, you shouldn't have allowed it to leak out, right?" Patricia Bullen sighed, and gray flames instantly overflowed from the corners of her eyes, fluttering like eyeshadow. She said, "I was quite lucky. Back in the Imperial City, I had a sage by my side." "A sage?" Dake suddenly said, "You're also from Signs?" Patricia Bullen smiled. "That's right. Signs, the city of knowledge, is where I was born. During the holidays, I rode on the sage group's carriage. It was thanks to them that I wasn't affected by the underworld fire. Now we're in a relatively stable state of symbiosis. The sages said that this isn't a bad thing. Signs really was full of sages." Dake sighed. "If you can perfectly control the underworld fire, it's indeed a useful tool. We can even see it as a special curse." Patricia Bullen nodded and said, "Underworld fire will only stimulate a person's desire for a duel. It won't devour a person's ego. Even if the person is defeated in the duel ritual, the person will only be deprived of memories related to the duel, and a small part of their abilities related to the duel. This punishment is nothing compared to the truly vicious curses." Dake nodded. "On the surface, that is indeed the case." Patricia Bullen said solemnly, "Looks like you've noticed it too. The wise ones all agree that the true danger of underworld fire isn't in its effects on the surface. Using my personal experience as an example, if all the possessors of underworld fire could sense each other and devour each other's underworld fire after winning a duel, then it could be understood that underworld fire had a kind of unifying nature. If they were allowed to develop without care, they would rely on this property to eventually merge from scattered individuals into a huge collective. This collective is where the real danger lies." Dake couldn't help but frown when he heard this. What he was worried about was the nature of underworld fire, as well as the social chaos this nature would cause. Although the manifestation was the same, the overall understanding was subtly different from Patricia Bullen's understanding. However, now that he was deducing with Patricia Bullen's way of thinking and combining it with what he had discovered so far, he suddenly realized some problems. His tone gradually became serious. "You mean, there's a main consciousness leading the gathering of these underworld fire? Their final gathering will awaken this main consciousness?" Patricia Bullen raised her head and looked at him. After a moment she said, "The wise ones believe that the opening of the door to the underworld ultimately caused all of this. A powerful consciousness wandering in the underworld tried to use this method to sneak into the human world and complete the reversal from death to life. The existence that can do this is usually called God." Dake's eyes flashed. "How should we call a god that returned from the underworld?" Patricia Bullen said, "Usually we call this type of god the god of the underworld." "The god of the underworld?" Dake said. Humans have just struggled out of a long and fierce battle with the devil race. And now they have to face the threat of the god of the underworld. The world is really restless. Patricia Bullen sipped her black tea and sighed. When I read through history, the twilight of the gods seemed to be right in front of us. But now, it seems that the gods are unwilling to be left out. I don't know if this is good or bad. Dake said, using history as a mirror, whenever a god shows signs of awakening, there will be a second, and then a third. This is the general trend, and it's not something that can be solved by human strength. Patricia Bullen said, the wise ones have the same idea as you. They've been preparing for this for months. However, Dake changed the topic and said, then have the wise ones thought about how to stop the first god of the underworld from awakening? Patricia Bullen said helplessly, they must have thought about it. On the surface, the simplest method is to stop the fusion of these underworld fire. But in fact, we don't know how much underworld fire this god needs to awaken. 1/3? 1/2? Or 100%? We don't even know how much underworld fire will escape. Dake pondered for a moment and said, if that's the case, the strategy of actively collecting underworld fire will not be feasible. Patricia Bullen said, it's not a bad thing to have a small amount of underworld fire. If you're lucky in the future, you might even be able to become the god of the underworld's agent in the mortal world. I mean, if the god of the underworld shows kindness. But if you have a large amount of underworld fire, and unfortunately become the carrier of the god of the underworld's awakening, I'm afraid there's no hope for you. Dake nodded and said, that's true. Then when you came over, why did you deliberately leak the aura of underworld fire? Patricia Bullen's eyes narrowed and she said in a low voice, in fact, I sensed some underworld fire aura at the masquerade party on Halloween. But that aura disappeared in a flash, and I still can't find it. Dake said, that means there's another person in the academy who has underworld fire, other than you and me? Patricia Bullen said, if the aura I smelled didn't come from your underworld fire. Dake asked curiously, I didn't summon my underworld fire at the masquerade party, but I used my underworld soul ring in the previous duels. Why didn't you have any reaction? Patricia Bullen shook her head and said, it's too far. I see. Dake nodded and accepted this explanation. After all, the underworld soul ring was a product of the second refinement of the underworld fire. And it wasn't the underworld fire itself. Furthermore, even if it was the underworld fire itself, there would definitely be a range of detection. If it was too far away, or if it was covered by something, it wouldn't be able to detect it. If there was a third person in the Shungmalian Academy who had the underworld fire, and this third person hadn't been discovered yet, he or she must have a corresponding method of concealing their aura. Dake and Patricia Bullen continued to chat for a long time, and they only separated when it was lunchtime. Even though Dake did invite Patricia Bullen for lunch, she said that it was a joke, and then said, I don't want my academy life to turn into hell. Just like that, he left without hesitation. After she left, Dake started to think alone. After today's incident, Patricia Bullen had probably alerted the enemy, and it would be even more difficult to find the third person. However, he wasn't too enthusiastic about finding the third person. Compared to that, he was more concerned about the progress of the Ragnarok. After an in-depth conversation with Patricia Bullen, he was even more certain that his interpretation of the prophecy was correct. Maybe this process is faster than we thought. He thought about it carefully and found that he had encountered 3 related incidents in just over a year. First was the recovery of the moon god, then the underworld god, and finally the heart of God. In the underground city. No, there seems to be more. Dake suddenly remembered that Susanna Montilferi had mentioned about the temples that worshipped the sun god and the moon god. In addition, the murals in the Kingdom of Gold were very likely related to God. Now that I think about it, there are already 5. I've been involved in 5 related incidents alone. The world is so big, and in places that I don't know, how many related incidents are happening at the same time. Dake couldn't help but frown. In the original game, the Ragnarok, incident didn't happen until the end of the game. Could there be some reason that caused the process to speed up? He quickly took out a pen and paper and wrote down his thoughts that day. Then he took his notebook and walked out of the club classroom. At noon, most of the students had already rushed to the cafeteria. Dake went straight to the pavilion in the middle of the lake and entered Traveler's Street through the teleportation hub. Not long after, he came to the branch of the Ultimate Duel Club and found Eve. There were fewer people in the afternoon, and Eve was about to temporarily close the shop and go to a nearby restaurant to eat something when she was stopped by Dake. Dake thought about it and wasn't in a hurry, so he followed Eve to the restaurant. The two chatted about some matters related to the shop before quickly finishing their meal and returning to the shop. Then Dake ordered Eve to use the consonant spell to contact Yvette or Claire. Soon, Claire Kate's projection was projected onto the wall through the consonant spell. Dake looked at the projection and said, "Good afternoon, Aunt Claire." Claire blinked and asked, "Is there anything urgent you want to say? I'm in the office now, and there's no one around except for Yvette." Dake nodded and summarized everything that happened today. Claire's expression was originally relaxed, and she wanted to share with Dake her joy of successfully building the Ultimate Duel Club's Royal Capital base. However, after listening to him, her expression gradually became serious. Then she frowned and said angrily, "Those old farts, how can they hide such crucial information?" Cough, cough, cough. Dake faked a cough and said, "Perhaps they have other ideas." Claire turned around and said, "This matter is very important. It seems like I have to go and find Yvette immediately. Do you have any other information to add?" Dake shook his head and said, "I actually don't know much." "Then study hard and don't think too much." Claire immediately stood up and said, "In short, even if the sky falls, your mother will hold it up. When she can't hold it anymore, I'll be behind her." If I can't hold it anymore, you'll have to stand up. Is there a problem with more pressure?" Dake, "There shouldn't be a problem." "That's good." Claire instantly revealed a bright smile. Then she glanced at Yvette, and the projection was instantly cut off. Dake asked, "Eve, have they left?" Eve nodded and said, "Yes, young master." Dake nodded slightly and suddenly said, "You don't have to think too much. Don't spread what you just heard. This matter may not be as serious as it seems on the surface." Eve said with a smile, "I'm well versed in this area." Dake nodded and said, "Then I'll go back first. Goodbye." Eve raised her hand and said, "Goodbye, young master." Dake immediately walked out of the shop, then rushed to the pavilion in the middle of the lake without stopping. He returned to the castle through the teleportation hub and walked toward the vice principal's office. He always felt that Professor Shi-Erfu, Professor Kazair, and the others should have already noticed this. After all, Professor Mityu knew more about Eudora's prophecy than he did. Professor Kazair went to the underground city all day long. Maybe he had this in mind. And when he thought of Professor Kazair's research, he felt a faint sense of relief. Sometimes he had to admit, Professor Kazair gave him the feeling that he was much more reliable than Principal Aerdii. But on second thought, Principal Aerdii was not in the academy all year round. Would he also be busy with related matters? The disputes between Prince Charles and Princess Elisha seemed to be getting fewer and fewer. The face of Chief Archbishop Michael Norris also rarely appeared on the newspaper pages. In the past, he liked to show his face very much. The Holy Church might have noticed something during the process of holy judgment. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, when they noticed it, the whole world had turned around the core of God's recovery. Dake walked in the castle. The bright afternoon sun shone through the castle entrance, making his figure gradually narrow and long. Soon after, he knocked on the door of Professor Shi-Erfu's office. He was lucky. Professor Shi-Erfu was inside. "Well, Dake, what's the matter?" Professor Shi-Erfu, who was handling official business at his desk, raised his head slightly and asked. Dake closed the door behind him and told him the information he had collected and his judgment one by one. "Good morning. We are 50,000 away from the 200,000 monthly update goal. There are only 6 days left. What should we do? Waiting online urgent." Chapter 662. As expected, Professor Shi-Erfu wasn't too surprised. She looked at Dark with slight admiration and said, "Actually, we already have some information about the underworld fire that you mentioned. The specific situation is similar to your inference." Dake blinked and suddenly understood. Other than the Holy Church, Didi Maxiway was also a big reason why the underworld fire was leaked. On the day of the execution ceremony, the professors were also present. After the incident, they quickly left. It was impossible that they didn't investigate the aftermath. Therefore, it wasn't strange that Professor Shi-Erfu knew about this beforehand. Dake asked, "Then is there a way to deal with it?" Professor Sylph shook her head and said, "There were too many people present at that time, and many of them had special identities, so it was not easy to investigate. Moreover, the person who was possessed by the fire of the underworld was actually a victim. It was impossible for us to capture him, so this matter itself is very difficult to solve." However, she immediately smiled and said, "Fortunately, not long after that, the Duke's mansion took action, which made it a lot easier for us. Even though we don't know what kind of existence the consciousness from the underworld is, if it wants to be resurrected, it needs enough underworld fire. We'll do our best to seal the underworld fire and reduce the possibility of it being resurrected. Even if it forcefully resurrected in the end, without enough underworld fire, its strength after resurrection would be extremely limited. When the time comes, we just need to capture it before it regains its full strength. And then..." She didn't finish her sentence. However, Dake already understood. Remember this. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The same thing from Patricia Balling's mouth and from Professor Shi-Erfu's mouth were two completely different things. From this, it could be seen that in this world where divine authority still existed, the magisters who walked at the front of the flood could already see the existence of God, very rationally. The more powerful the magisters, the less reverence they had for God. After walking out of Professor Shi-Erfu's office, Dake felt a lot more relaxed. Just now, Professor Shi-Erfu had given him a very shocking idea in his office. How could one defeat a god? Kill a god first. For archmages, as long as they had enough rare materials, they would be able to refine powerful magic guiding fairies. The so-called card of God was originally made from the materials of God. As long as he could kill a god, he would be able to obtain a large amount of god materials. After that, he would be able to kill even more gods. Excluding the halos created by the long history and legends, the so-called gods were nothing more than beings that had reached a certain level of power, even if their life form had already transcended a certain dimension and could not be completely killed. However, it was still possible to kill it in the present realm and return it to the primal chaos. Otherwise, the twilight of the gods wouldn't have appeared. In other words, since the twilight of the gods had appeared more than once, why not recreate it again? Wasn't this the prophecy of Eudora Entree? After Ragnarok, if the humans still wanted to maintain their sovereignty, there was only one way to do so. It was just another war that would be even more grand and lasting than the war with the demons. The only thing that needed to be considered was how many people would be sacrificed in this process. As for whether they could achieve the final victory, this was not within the scope of consideration. Dake originally thought that the position of the Shungmalian Academy was absolutely neutral, but Professor Shi-Erfu had just made a clear position clear. Between humans and gods, they undoubtedly chose the side of humans. On the way back to the dormitory, Dake suddenly had a thought. Perhaps this was the true meaning of the existence of the Shungmalian Academy? Humans, the last arc. However, the arc that was supposed to be used to continue the fire was now equipped with heavy firepower. As for the demons, Dake had always felt that perhaps in the eyes of the Shungmalian Academy, the demons also belonged to the category of humans. However, after the war entered a stage where there was no turning back, the Shungmalian Academy was forced to make a choice between the two and chose the current humans. The gods that were about to be revived were the real outsiders. Dake could not help but think of the passage recorded in the chapters of the old days. They existed at least 5 eras ago. They came from the starry sky. They walked in the abyss. They were once great. They once ruled the worlds. They had long been forgotten by history. They were the rulers of the old days buried in the dust of ancient times. Did they come from the starry sky? Dake Dimon could not help but squint his eyes. Did the demons of the 7 deadly sins also come from the starry sky? Maybe. No wonder. Dake crossed the bridge and entered the tower. He walked past the common room, then went up to the 3rd floor and entered dormitory 301. Meow. Dake picked up the catnip that dragged a small flower tray over as usual. He sat down at the desk and pondered for a long time. Unknowingly, the sun set, the moon rose above the treetops, and night came. Dake suddenly came back to his senses. He realized that he had wasted an entire afternoon. He could not help but wring his hands. He hurriedly began the research that he had not finished yesterday. In today's duel with Patricia Bullen, he had indeed experienced the dominance of the 3-star, illusory beast, Ivan. Now that 2 cards had such an effect, what if he had 3? If he had 3 3-star, illusory beast, Ivan, not only would he have a higher chance of getting it, but he would also be able to summon any 3 magical spirits from the deck. More importantly, after using Catch, illusory beast, Ivan would only return to his hand. He could summon it again. These 3 3-star, illusory beast, Ivan, no matter what deck he put them in, would be able to link the deck together. Apart from the first time, he also felt the limitations of the other low-star magical spirits. For example, Ball Sea Lion, Spirit Bug, Wrestling Hawkman, even Magician Secretary, had lost their sense of existence in a magical duel of this level. Although Kettle Kettle was still reliable, if it was not a starting summon, its usefulness was actually very limited. Once the opponent's trump card was a 3rd-tier magical spirit that surpassed 6 stars, Kettle Kettle's tricks would not be very effective. Apart from this, it was the same for some of the 4-star magic guide fairies. Fairy Ivan was still fine. After all, it had Charming Body, which was a great weapon against the opposite sex. But Big Milkin was already out of the game. 4-star magical spirits that could not be specially summoned required 1 3-star, 1 1-star, or 2 2-star magical spirit cards to be sacrificed to summon them. And as Illusory Beast, Ivan, and Illusory Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, were strengthened to 3 stars, the number of sacrifices for 4-star magical spirits was decreasing. It was very likely that even after the duel ended, there would not be enough sacrifices for 4-star magical spirits. Perhaps Trash Slime could be used. But there was only 1 Greed 3, and it needed to be used where it was needed most. As for the 1-star Fruit-Gnawing Bug, it clearly could not keep up with the pace of the duel. Perhaps only after Dake figured out how to refine them and completely mastered second refinement would they be able to return to the stage. But this was basically a process that every Magus had to go through. Only by constantly eliminating the cards in the early stages and constantly renewing and strengthening the card deck could one maintain the lead in the magic duel. But Dake's magical spirits still had the potential to rise again. Apart from that, Dake realized that the lack of high-star magical spirit cards in his card deck was becoming more and more obvious. He clearly had a large number of sacrifices in his field, but he did not have enough high-grade magical spirit cards, which greatly limited the strength of his lineup. According to the rules of sacrifice summoning, in the Magic Duel's card deck structure, the best magical spirit cards should be 3, 6, or 9 stars. When I create the 3rd 3-star, Illusory Beast, Ivan, I'll temporarily stop and consider creating some high-grade magical spirit cards. Dake gradually came up with a new plan. Then on Sunday morning, he defeated the 3rd-year senior who was matched by the Duel Club, and went to Traveler's Street to meet with Claire again through Eve. Both sides did not talk much this time, and after Claire gave a simple explanation, she got busy. Yvette did not seem to be overly surprised by the information he gave her. Even without Dake's knowledge, they had already begun experimenting with artificial uses of underworld fire. The people of the Duke's mansion made a breakthrough discovery. Not only could underworld fire possess humans, but it could also possess animals and even magical creatures. Moreover, depending on who it possessed, the duel ritual would also change. Not all duels between underworld fire holders were magic duels. In fact, this was only a small part of them. Most of the underworld fire holders would duel based on the skills they were passionate about or were good at. For example, a tailor would compete with others in tailoring skills, and a lawyer would compete with others in debating. There was also an orc who, after being possessed, would actually compete with others in terms of appetite, through a duel ritual. After winning, the orc's digestive ability would further increase, and its opponent would suffer from indigestion. Not to mention the outcome of its opponent. In short, after the orc won continuously, its digestive ability would become stronger and stronger, to the point that no matter how much food was stuffed into it, it would not be able to fill its stomach. Because of its unrestrained gluttony, its body would continue to expand, even breaking through the limits of its race's size. It was very terrifying. Its gluttony would also continue to soar, and it would almost become a beast that only knew how to eat. The troops sent by the Duke's mansion could be said to have saved it, but only its life, and not its body. It had been more than 2 months since Dake started school. In these 2 months, the people of the Duke's mansion had already collected hundreds of underworld fire. These underworld fire were not sealed in containers, and in fact, underworld fire was extremely difficult to seal. In fact, they relied on a dual ritual to take back the underworld fire and store it in their bodies. They maintained the necessary vigilance, and basically, each of them would not have more than 2 underworld fire in their bodies. But later on, when the use of the underworld fire was gradually analyzed, the people of the Duke's mansion even developed a very different way to use the underworld fire. The Scorpio Palace maids and Lion Palace maids, which were respectively controlled by Chris Dimming and Katrina Dimming, even fought over this, hoping to obtain more underworld fire. Regarding this matter, Dake was completely speechless after hearing about it. On his side, there were still people who were worried about finding the third student who had the underworld fire. But on the other side, the Duke's mansion had already been swept up. After Chris and Katrina's experiments, they used a dual ritual to transfer the underworld fire to a monster. That's right, it was transferred to a monster's body. Monsters were a combination of the desire to fight. Their dual ritual was only to fight, and fight again. Every dual ritual would allow the winning magical creature to absorb a portion of its magical power, physical strength, or strength from the losing magical creature. And after a few duels, the monster's strength would continue to grow. The maids controlled the intensity of the battle. When the monster's strength reached a certain level, the maids who also had the underworld fire would start a dual ritual against it. And the dual ritual carried out by the maids was naturally a dual ritual between the maids. The dual ritual could be about cooking or craftsmanship. In short, as long as it wasn't about killing or fighting, the monster had no chance of winning. The maids could easily win. But after winning, due to the dual ritual, the maids would not be able to absorb the enormous power brought by the underworld fire. But what if another combat maid with the underworld fire challenged her to a duel? Of course, the combat maid who easily won the duel ritual would be able to perfectly absorb the enormous power brought by the underworld fire. After this process, the underworld fire in the combat maid's body would remain in the state of 3 fused flowers. As for how to suppress the combat maid's duel ritual, it was said that there was an expert in this field in the Duke's mansion. In short, the combat maids in the Duke's mansion ruthlessly took a handful of the underworld god's wool and obtained an unprecedented increase in power. Some combat maids who were lacking in magic power even obtained a huge amount of magic power through this. The armed card that they couldn't equip before could now be properly equipped. The entire Duke's mansion set off a frenzy of people chasing after the underworld fire. Perhaps that Mr. Underworld God, who was smuggled in from the underworld and had yet to fully awaken, would not have thought that his underworld fire would have such a magical effect? Good morning, I'm too busy today. Last 5 days, I don't want to save the monthly ticket and the guaranteed blade, please. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.